Carrie, we're all fired up back there? Yes. All right, I've got 6 o'clock, so we'll call our meeting to order. I'm not going to use this tonight. I'll just set that right there. Thanks for coming out tonight. We'll start as we usually do with the Pledge of Allegiance, so if you'll all stand with us. Carrie, if you'll read the roll call tonight.
Mr. Steinberg?
Here.
Mrs. Rorich?
Here.
Mr. White?
Here.
Mr. Whittington?
Here.
Mayor Oranger?
Here. We do have a quorum tonight, so we can get started. I will open the floor to public comments. If you are here to speak to the council about a topic that's not on our agenda tonight, now is your opportunity. I think most of you are scheduled here tonight, correct? So we'll get started. Council, you've got the agenda in front of you. Are there any modifications or additions to tonight's agenda? Now look for a motion to approve the agenda tonight.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? And that carries. Then in your packet on page 3, we have the council meeting minutes from May 2nd. And is that correct? Carrie, looks like we've got June 6th on the date. We're just saying the May 2nd is in the agenda, maybe it's incorrect, right?
There is June 6th, June 21, and June 28.
All right, so you've got 3 different minutes in the packet from June. Did anybody see anything that they would like to have corrected? If not, then we'll package all of those together. All in favor of those minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. You've got your consent agenda then included in the packet, and I'll just kind of point out a couple of notable resignations. So one of our full-time police officers, Ben Romig, has turned in his resignation, and we also have the resignation of Larry Custer, who's been working with the Public Works Department. Is there anything in the consent agenda tonight that anyone would like to have pulled for further discussion? I look for a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda.
Second.
Mayor, I'm going to abstain since we have a bill in there from our company as well.
All right, very well. Is there any other discussion? John, were you just trying to second? Or?
Yeah, that's all I was doing.
All right. All in favor then of the consent agenda tonight, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And we'll have the one abstaining vote, and that carries. And we'll move on to presentations. So we've got a number of people lined up here to bring some items to the council and present some information. So we'll start with the Agency Street project. And Jennifer, I'm going to let you lead in on this. I know we've got a couple of different people here to speak, and if we've got a spokesman or if everybody's kind of on their own,
Okay.
I'll let you lead in on this.
Sounds great. All right, Mayor and City Council, we have had a couple residents contact City Hall with concerns about restoration work complete as part of the Agency Street project. The complaints have comprised mainly of poor soil quality, debris in the soil, glass, rock, and weeds. And then we also have another resident that contacted the city with a concern about tree damage. And the tree is now dead and has had a tree company look at their tree and believes that it has to do with the project. So in my memo that I sent out with The packet, there was a letter and some pictures from Monica Hinsey at 102 North Agency Street, and she cited concerns with restoration work on her property Boulevard. She is, I believe, at the meeting tonight to talk about her concerns in more detail. I've also talked to Yvonne Selfer, and she's in the audience as well. And there may be some others. And I did receive an email, which I forwarded on to you over the weekend from Vicki Hubel, also citing concerns with restoration work. Bolton Bank did put out a door hanger to let residents know about discussion that was going to take place at tonight's meeting, to make sure that they let us know so that we get their items addressed before the project is closed out. And Brian Sarf and Joe Smith of Bolton Bank have been in contact with the contractor, and we'll give Brian an opportunity to kind of give us an update on that. And then also included in the packet is a picture of the tree at 212 South Agency Street, which belongs to Tom Hager. And as I stated before, he believes that his tree was damaged during the construction project and now needs to be removed as it is dead. He did have a tree service company come out and look at the tree. And like I mentioned, they believe that it's hollowing out on the inside and attribute it to the root system damage from the project. And so I believe Mr. Hager will be asking for financial compensation to have it removed. After talking with Bolton and Mink, it's not conclusive that the tree was damaged by the project, so hoping tonight we can just talk about whether the city is going to bear the cost of removing the tree, or if there's a cost share, some sort of negotiation. So those are the main things tonight, and I'll pull up on the screen here in just a minute some of the pictures. Maybe I could turn over to Brian Sarf or Mayor and City Council if you'd like to hear from the residents. That would be appropriate as well.
Yeah, I think some of you have come up tonight, and I think you may have some interest in speaking to the council. I know we do have our engineer here, so hopefully we can kind of pull everything together and get a game plan here for working through this. So does the council have any questions at this time? Well then, Brian, would you like to start, or should we see if we take some questions from residents?
Well, thank you for having me tonight. So in terms of this project, we have been in contact with Dirt Merchant. They've been doing some work this spring, including some our routine concrete repairs and whatnot. At this time, we are well outside of the seeding window. When temperatures get consistently this warm, seed tends to become dormant at this time, and for us to plant seed right at this point would not be a productive matter. So typically those seeding windows, I don't know the exact dates, but they're in the earlier spring and then later into the fall, and those time frames. We are well aware of the issues. We're not at the point where the project is acceptable. It's not at acceptance. Some areas are, but others certainly are not. There are areas with weeds that need to be addressed. The seeding contractor has been made aware of this. And one of the reasons that, again, that some of this lagged a little bit is we had some concrete contractor into the boulevards, messing it up again to make those necessary repairs this spring. And by the time you work through that process, now we're outside of that seeding window. So we do have a running punch list. The items that Jennifer has forwarded on to me, including those, this last weekend, have been added to that list. We're aware of low spots, of areas with weeds, of things like that, and those are on the contractor's to-do list, if you will, to be done before the project is accepted. With that, is there any questions from the council? Or I'm certainly willing to take questions from the public as well.
Well, I think things I've noted just in kind of my walking across, and I think it's probably held up by some of the comments that these people will have. I noticed there's a lot of debris in the topsoil, concrete, various pieces. I know Monica's got a bucket full of stuff that was pulled out. what would be the process, I guess, at this time, to come back in and clean that up a little bit? You know, there's a lot of, I don't know if you want to call them, you know, apple size or smaller stones, concrete chunks,
Sure.
bits of the old pipe that was under the road. I mean, there's a little bit of everything that I've noted.
Right. We did do a walkthrough, and especially in the areas surrounding the railroad crossing on North Agency, that's where our attention was. It was pointed to those locations, and the contractor is made aware of those. I think they have been in there to a certain extent. I think they're going to be back this week even doing that and other things, which involves them going in there, whether it be with machinery or by hand, picking out some of those larger issues. I've not, and maybe Mayor, you could speak to this. We haven't noticed that as much on South Agency. Certainly, it's normal to see smaller rocks, especially as you get rain. You know, smaller rocks are going to show up, especially until the grass establishes itself. But larger chunks, you know, debris, concrete, clay, all that is certainly not up to spec. You know, it needs to be removed. What the process is, you know, that's certainly the contractor's means and methods on how they're going to remove it.
So is there maybe like a power raking kind of a, I mean, if we're going to sacrifice what we've got there now, since a lot of it is weed and, you know, hasn't really been well established, and we have to reseed in the fall, is there a process that they can clear out and then add, you know, more topsoil in places that require it?
Yes, there's certainly that. The downside is you are starting from square zero,
Right.
you know, and grass does take time to establish. It's not a 30-day process by any means. It takes time and maintenance to get back to what it was, years in some cases, you know, depending on the weather. But they can bring in machinery, a Harley rake to work that up. Certainly we can add black dirt as we direct them as well. That would just be my one disclaimer on that, is we are accepting that in those areas, hey, we're starting from scratch at that point.
Yeah, I think there are some areas we're gonna need to start from scratch, and on the south side where I walk every day, it's mostly weeds, so there's no way grass is gonna establish in the amount of weeds that are there, so
Sure.
at least we can get some weed control to knock that down. But I think we might have to go through and look and say, we want, you know, topsoil and reseed here, you know, this is just an overseed, like weed kill and overseed and that kind of thing, you know, throughout the project. Because by this, I don't see that on the south side, but I don't walk that far north, so.
Sure.
But it is pretty weedy on the south side.
Yep, for sure.
Any other council comments? Any of the public wish to bring up, kind of maybe recap some of your lists and some of the items and see if we can get a game plan? I'll just let you come up. I just ask that you give us your name and address then as you,
I was listening to this debris thing every time it rains. This is what I picked up this morning out of my property. And this is what my son got with his rider on Wednesday night. A big piece of metal. Luckily, I didn't have the other mower, and then a big piece of tire. And with spraying, I've been fortunate enough to spray. But there's one weed that's all over the boulevards that will not take the spray. And it's very thick. And I just picked this in my yard on the other side of the sidewalk in like an 8 by 10 area. And this was boulevard, just Central Spring. And I've got, there's pictures here, this is where I picked them out of. The dirt,
Are these different photos from what we've got up on the screen here?
They are, yes.
yeah, you have the debris ones. So, and this was at Yvonne's yard with the weeds. And this is where they filled in the corner of my lot there that was down about 2 inches. But they just put the dirt on top of the weeds. Okay, and this is the city's property that goes on the alley down to the bottom down there. The apartments, and this is how long it was. And yet we had people stopping and telling us to get rid of our weeds. But Friday, he was out there mowing. And now this is manholes that, I don't know who's responsible for the drains. Is that city property or?
Well, that'd all be a part of the project, so until it's accepted, it'll be the contractor's duties.
And then this is the manholes, and he was finally there with a big mower, but he couldn't get it all. And I'm familiar with Bolton and Ming's work when they did Second Street crossing. We still have a lot of weeds. I have sprayed the grass area, and I have taken care of the grass back there, which is supposed to be either theirs or cities too. I was lucky enough not to have any glass in mine, so nobody got hurt on glass, but
Mine
these
did.
two,
I'm Ann Arnett. I live at 145 North Agency, and the boulevard was full of typical rocks, but I had a lot of glass there, and I had a great-grandson actually playing out there. He fell and cut his hand. I mean, there's glass mixed in all over, and I can't pick them up. I mean, I'm disabled, I can't
Right.
bend over to do it. And then the rocks that they had, the front of my house has rocks or stones that laid down, they were kind of decorative. They had moved those to fix and lay new grass. Well, the company that they hired couldn't have put down decent, the black, tarp that goes under the rocks, because I've got weeds all over growing, and that's supposed to be brand new. I shouldn't have any weeds. But it's the glass I'm having problems with.
Hey, Brian, do you know if any of the soil came from off-site, the topsoil, or was that reused in the project?
I don't know for sure. Typically, it is partially reused, in large part actually, and then they'll have to supplement that from off-site
Okay.
sources. Common, from topsoil.
Brian,
Right.
who did that part of the work? And I asked because last year when I did my backyard, I had a landscaping company haul in 3 dump trucks of what I thought was black soil. And it was full of the exact debris, full of glass, full of everything. And being right by the park, I spent, and I'm still
Right.
spending months doing it. So I'm wondering if it's the same company or who brought it in.
DMI.
But was DMI the one that brought in this part of it, or did they hire a landscaping company to do so?
DMI is the one that installed the topsoil.
Okay.
And he happened to be at my place this morning, and I seen him walking down the sidewalk, and I came out and I said, "Are you here to look at the weeds and stuff?" And he said, "No." He had gotten a list in June from you guys, and he said that wasn't on. So I don't know if you have to give another list. You said you had updated it, but he just had the June 1st list. So I told him that he'll probably be getting another list.
And I'm Yvonne Sulfur, and I live on 109 North Agency. Now, things like this, I don't need to be finding in my yard, and it wrecked my mower, by the way. I have big rocks, like Monica. I mean, you know, I don't know what this stuff is, but it doesn't even look like rock. And as you can see, I have fishing line also that I had in there. And I have the weeds that are bad. And I have glass, and I had this, whatever it is, piece of metal. I mean, it's just crazy because we shouldn't have this in
Right.
that dirt. Not at all. And when I was mowing, I have a push mower, or, you know, and it shot underneath that thing and was going around. I thought I broke my mower somehow or something, you know. And this came shooting out underneath it. And the same with the glass when I was mowing, and it shot out underneath and just barely missed my leg. So, I mean, stuff like that, I'm not, like, John stopped by, the weeds were high, I said, I'm not mowing it, because I'm not gonna wreck my mower more. And I certainly wasn't gonna have glass or something coming into my leg. So, I mean, it's crazy that all of this stuff has to be in there. And I don't know what this stuff is, but that grows in there, and it lays flat like this, and it's all over in there.
I have that all.
I don't know what it is, but, and Monica's sun sprayed a little bit on my side. It didn't kill anything off. It's still there.
And the bad part about this weed,
It
it's on my
spreads.
sidewalk,
Yeah.
and it catches your shoe, and if I wouldn't have had my cane, I'd have fallen. I can't afford to get somebody to come in and kill those weeds, and if they did kill them, it'd just be down to black dirt.
But it isn't even black dirt, it's kind of a gray.
There's the sheets of glass. It was a bigger piece, but
That's
that
what-
came out from underneath too. And that is hard glass. I don't know what that came from.
That's what my grandson.
But it's bad to have that all in that dirt. And I'm with Monica. I think we ought to have some kind of, yard person or somebody come and check that all out, maybe dig it up and put regular black dirt that was
Right.
there in
That-
the beginning.
That's the way it feels to me, is
This
that
is not right.
we're to a point where, again, we're gonna sacrifice this year's grass growth to come back in and scrape off, get rid of what sounds like debris-laden black dirt that was hauled in, and I don't know if there's better piles that they've got, if some are mixed, but I think we'll have to
Mine was a last minute, that they had, the next day had to be over at St. Clair for a project. So they rushed things, and I don't know where, like you said, I don't know where they got this dirt.
Right.
It wasn't dirt like we had before.
Brian, I'm going to put you on the spot here again. I know that maybe this doesn't pertain to you, but I think in the meantime, you know, because it'll take a bit to get a schedule put together for this. In the meantime, you know, so again, if we've got residents trying to mow and there's debris, wire, metal pieces, you know, is there something, I guess, that we look at as let's just leave it be? Can you come up with something at this point to find out a schedule so we know how long that would be before we can get them in there to do some work? Are we out of line in pressing for that, or?
Brian, can I interrupt you for a second? I got an email from a resident who's watching the YouTube live stream, and just asked that people speak into the microphone. I don't know if Brian would be willing to go up to the microphone. I'm sorry to interrupt you. Thank you.
Okay. She has some pictures she wants to.
I just wanted to show you what it did do to underneath the mower.
Sure.
And, you know, that's from the, probably from the glass and from the metal or the wrought iron.
Right, you're right.
And I also had like this big of a sinkhole in my yard where they dug through. And I don't know if that's where they put the water pipes down through there or something, but they did come and go in the house and they put a camera through to see if something was out there.
Collapsed and,
Well, they got the camera stuck a few times through the piping, so hopefully they didn't do anything damage to it. But all they did was come and put topsoil over the top of the hole. Well, that's not doing anything because when my grandkids came and he happened to go across there and he sunk right in, his foot sunk right in with that dirt they got on top. So there was something happening underneath in there and it needs to be checked out. I'm not gonna go across
All right.
with my mower or something, you know.
so Brian, do you have that on your punch list then?
I believe we do.
All right. Well, yeah, I think the way it sounds is that we need to get a schedule for what the remedy is and make it very clear to residents what will be happening. You know, at this point, if we've got debris in the boulevards and, you know, we've encroached, you know, up into the yards, we just worry about, yeah, is there gonna be additional damage and things like that. So time is of the essence. I know they're gonna say they're all busy, but
Well, so what I had started to say was,
why don't you pull the microphone up too?
what I had started to say is that I think Dirt Merchant is going to be in town tomorrow potentially to work on other things that, you know, besides grass growth and stuff, there are a few other outstanding items, so they're gonna be on site tomorrow. We can certainly, it seems to me like the bulk of the debris, as we'd kind of discussed earlier, it seems to be kind of centered in your guys' neighborhood, unfortunately, and it's not acceptable. We're not trying to say, you know, it's good enough at this point, absolutely not, so.
And I sprayed a couple times, but the Weed Be Goner, that Spectrum, did not take all this other stuff coming up, so I don't know.
Sure. So with that said, I think in the immediate future, we can, you know, it'd be good to look at these lawns. Let's try to remove any of these things that can cause damage. And again, the longer term solution is gonna have to wait a little bit, just because of the weather. There's really not much we can do about that.
Well, I
So,
think at this point, probably the most pressing issue is the debris.
yes.
You know, sodding, you know, I was surprised that we saw it come up as well as we did over the winter, but, yeah, we may not have our lawns back in shape this year, but, I'd rather have it clean and ready to go rather than a weed pile full of debris, so I think that's what we need to start planning, and then if we can let the residents know, you know, if we can get somebody out to maybe do some, you know, intensive inspection on the
Sure.
north side.
Yep.
If you haven't cleaned all of the stuff out of it already.
Every time
You got nice big bags full of stuff.
Every time it rains, that stuff seems to come to the surface.
Right.
So it must be really down in there. But my main concern is to get that hole inspected.
Okay.
This is actually what it looks like.
Oh, yeah.
It's a big sinkhole. I don't know where, you know, what to do. They put black dirt or whatever kind of dirt over the top of it. It doesn't even look like black dirt, actually. It looks like sand. Because it's gray.
All right, I think we can put that on the list. Well, I appreciate your diligence and your willingness to come up and bring this to us, and so
Thank you.
we'll have Brian put together kind of the schedule, and again, we'll let everybody know what, you know, the process will look like going on, but we'll try to address some of these kind of immediate concerns right away.
Jennifer and Mayor, question for you, like, on projects such as this, I mean, it was a massive nuisance to agency residents, not only financially, but just the nuisance of it. Restoring it back to reasonable condition of what it was before, most of those residents, from north to south didn't have massive weeds, and the whole, it's not isolated to just one house or one area, it's the whole road. So, I guess my question is, in the past or looking forward, we can't necessarily change what we were doing now, but if we know that, yes, residents need to water within reason, but it's not an isolated issue, it's street-wide, the whole thing. Do we need to do like a 2-year, or can we do like a 2-year maintenance where it's part of the project to go out and spray for the weeds? I mean, they're already getting hit with assessments and hit with the sidewalk and hit with this and that, and now we're gonna put new seed, not sod, that people have to water, and then deal with the weeds that are coming up and now pay for someone to come out. You know, like, it just keeps adding on. You know, so if I'm putting myself in their shoes, I got assessed and now I got crap sod, or seed, that I have to water and I have to maintain. So, I mean, I can kind of feel for where these guys are at. So whether it's this project or a project in the future, how do we resolve this where it's not consistent like this each time?
And I watched them seed it. They took a handful and did a whole big area and just, by hand, just went out. There wasn't enough seed in there to do anything.
The seed is still there, and all you gotta get between where all the seed is, nothing
Is
but weeds
weeds.
coming out. It's only weeds, it's coming
Right.
off the grass.
Not in Eagle Lake, but in another city I worked, restoration work is always a challenge. It undoubtedly is with every project, that's the hardest part at the end. But I don't know what Brian would think about this, but sometimes you can set aside money that you can close a project out and then set aside money that you think might be needed to continue with ongoing issues, whether it's sod or seeding, and it doesn't take, because you're right, it takes time to get it established, and
Yeah, like
You
you
wanna
said,
make
it's
sure
not a
it's done
6-month
right.
thing and now you got nice
Yep.
green grass. I mean, it's a 2-year deal before you're gonna have it, and it's the spraying, the maintaining, this, all of that. I mean, Mankato, they just did sidewalks and, you know, but where we work, and they came back and put sod down, not seed, but then every morning they had someone out dumping water on it, you know, so, I know that's not something Public Works can do, but is something like that needed in future projects so that we don't have these consistent nuisances for the residents and frankly us too, coming back to it?
Yeah, I hear your concern for sure. I would, I guess say for this, Blue Earth, obviously we've partnered with Blue Earth County on this particular project, and one of their policies, if you will, is to hire a lawn service, and that's no different for this project, to come in a couple of years afterwards and treat the right-of-way, essentially, or, you know, the area surrounding the right-of-way that were disturbed, so that even for this project, that is a piece of it. You know, the first hurdle is, you know, trying to get a baseline where it's at least acceptable that we can move forward. So maybe not 100% there, but that element of long-term maintenance is incorporated into this particular project.
Yeah, I would think
You
we-
could notify us too,
Yes.
when they plan to do this, because they don't come to the door, they just show up and do what they think they should do. And if I don't catch them, I can't go out there and say, hey, this is what I want done.
Understood. If we can catch them before we get out there, we will notify you. So.
So do you know also how long it would maybe be before someone comes and checks that area out, that sinkhole? If they're gonna dig it up or take that dirt off that they put on top that's sinking too?
If their schedule holds, I'm thinking there's gonna be someone there tomorrow on site, and we can look at it tomorrow.
Because then I hate to have somebody go walking across here and something happen.
Understand.
Okay.
Thank you.
Did you have something you
Yeah,
wanted to
I think that's right. If we have something and it's more consistent, because homeowners are different, and just being able to get it restored back to the way it was, the well-established lawns, you know, would be, if we can do that, that would be great.
wouldn't we just put that into our bid specs then when we bid the project? I suppose that would be the way to address it moving ahead.
Yeah, we can definitely talk strategies going into the future. It's something, you know, we as a company talk about all the time. It just can be a problem, and oftentimes the issue is one of the biggest variables in this whole thing is Mother Nature. You know, if we would have planted seed and got a couple of days of a nice soaking rain, you'd be amazed at how the project looks, but that's just not how it goes a lot of times, and we can't control that. But
Right.
we'll do what we can to, you know, try to engineer a way through it for sure.
All right, Mr. Hager, you had also kind of tying in with the project here.
My boulevard looks great. Sorry. I'm Tom Hager. I live at 212 South Agency. And that's the tree. That tree normally, I don't know if you got anybody, I know, Tim, I've seen you walk by there. I don't know if you've noticed it in the past, but usually it fills out. It's a beautiful tree. Since they dug up the alley, that's what's going on with the tree. The north side of the tree, as you can see, is just gone, basically. The south side is still full of foliage. I had Nick Johnstone out. Nick bought Melcher's Tree Service. He's a certified arborist. And Nick told me that there's no doubt in his mind that it was the digging that took place is what killed it. When they dug that up, they dug up a bunch of roots, okay? And the roots are what feed the tree, and it's not feeding the tree. And I had him out here a couple of days ago again. He was looking at it, and what we were noticing, it's just getting browner and browner, the leaves, and there's actually, I took a picture this afternoon. I apologize, my printer's not full of ink, but you can kind of see where I circled there. There's one big branch now that's busted. It's probably the size of my arm, and it's busted, and I imagine it's going to fall pretty much any time. I asked Nick if it was something where it's going to come back. He said, no, the tree's gone at this point, and it's a matter it's going to have to come out. I've got more pictures. They're pretty much what you guys have. I did get a picture here of how close the cut was. Again, you can't really see it on this picture, but where the cut was from the tree is about 4 to 5 feet. Okay, where they started cutting. And then the alley, the root system, he said, goes out as far as the canopy of the tree. So there was a big, huge section of the roots that were taken out. And so I don't know if you have questions for me or what, but that's kind of where I'm at. The tree's dead, it needs to be taken out. I don't want anybody to get hurt.
I guess the question that I have, and maybe Brian, you might be able to weigh in on this, is the tree fully on your property, or
I don't know if it's my property or city property.
is
It's
it on the
boulevard
alley
between
property?
the alley and the driveway.
It appears to be on private property.
It's private property? Okay.
Yep, it's a few feet from the alley right of way.
Yeah, because I know it's tight in there, so,
Yeah, I don't know what the right-of-way is, but it's, I mean, what is that, maybe 5 feet between the driveway and the alley? The tree's pretty much in the middle of it. That's, yeah,
Yep, a few feet, you know.
yeah.
Mayor, Brian would like to talk here.
Yeah. Is this on?
Tom?
Green light's on, but I don't know if everybody can hear me or not. But, so that's the same tree that was damaged this spring, the
yeah,
big branch.
right.
So, yeah, that big branch that's broke off, that fell on Lang's house too. So, it's kind of obvious too that the tree was damaged before from the storm.
I asked Bob and Nick, they came out and took care of that. And I asked them at the time if that was going to damage the tree itself, if that was going to cause major damage to the tree. They said, no, it wouldn't.
Yeah.
And then when I had Nick out, again, when he looked at it, I said, well, what about that? Because I'm thinking the same thing, that was a big branch that came off of there. He said, that's not going to, the tree will come back from that. He said, where the tree gets fed is from the root system. And that's what's killing this.
Yeah. Because you can see how it was rotted inside that where it split and broke apart and stuff.
Right.
So,
Yeah, I had a family of raccoons in there this spring.
yeah, and that, that's the side that's dying and stuff.
Right.
But, yeah, I don't know if it's, just from looking at it, I would think it would be, the storm damage more than the roots. From the pictures, I can't see any roots really in the pictures where they were digging.
Well, I sat and watched them pretty much for most of the project. I'm an old retired guy, and that's what you do. And, you could see them taken the roots away. There's, again, as I was talking to Nick, he said they would have had to been magicians not to have pulled up roots from where it was dug there. I don't even know if I have a picture here. I don't have a picture of that part. I do have Nick's card here if you guys want. As I say, he's a certified arborist, and he said you guys are welcome to give him a call. I understand exactly what you're saying, I do, and I thought the same thing, but he did assure me, he said the branch would not have caused this type of damage. The branch, it was a big branch, the branch was as big as I am, you know, and it was a big branch, and I thought at the time, you know, that's gonna cause problems. At that time, Nick, I don't know if he had bought the business yet, but Bob Melcher was out with it also. Bob's been doing this forever. And they both thought that that wasn't going to cause any damage. Nick swears at this point that that's not what did it, that it was the roots that have done it. And he said the tree is not going to come back. It's, you know, it's.
Brian, do you know if your on-site inspector would have had any notes in regard to that during the excavation? If they noted anything as far as encountering roots?
I guess the facts, as we talked, are that in the pictures that we have, we didn't see any visible roots, certainly nothing large. We connect, the closest the city project got to the tree, we made the connection about 18 feet from the trunk of the tree, so the trench probably would have gone a little closer to the tree. So we're talking in the neighborhood of 15 feet. That's all I know. I guess the other wild card in this whole scenario is the gas company, I believe, might have been doing some work in the alley, which would have been closer to the tree. Certainly related to the project, not directly in the city's contract by any means either. And maybe Mr. Hagar could speak to that too, if you observed the gas company doing.
I didn't know who was doing what.
Sure.
But I know that that cut was a heck of a lot closer than the 18 feet. On the picture, I mean, it was, they cut 5 feet from the tree. You know, that's. I wish I had a bigger tape measure where it would have shown up better on that picture. But that's exactly where the cut started, was 5 feet away from the tree. I don't remember either how far into the boulevard they came. They came somewhat into the boulevard, which would have put them closer yet. And as I say, as I was watching, you know, I'm watching them with those loaders, and the branch, the roots are hanging out as they're taking the dirt away, you know, and cleaning it up. I see, you know, the picture doesn't show it real well, but there's just no way they could miss them. I mean.
Sure.
Was there any excavating done on the south side of, say, even this tree? Because it's just weird to me that it's like straight down the tree, everything north is dead, everything south is not. Was all the digging and excavating done to the north, nothing to the south? I would assume.
Yeah, primarily the digging was, if I get my directions right, to the east of the tree.
Yeah,
That was
okay.
the primary, certainly from the city's standpoint, that's all that was happening. There might have been gas work, which we weren't intimately involved with. Primarily, though, it was the east side of the tree.
What's the typical recourse if a project does kill a tree like that? I mean, it happens, and I don't know if that's in the specs at all to.
It's not specifically addressed. I guess what I could say is that if we had gone into this project and identified, you know, this tree was well outside of the project limits. If we would have identified, and we did identify trees that were in the project limits that we didn't think were gonna make it, we paid the contractor, you know, a competitive unit price to remove the stump and all that ahead of time, essentially. So we have a contract price for that. In terms of what happens, it really varies from council to council, city to city on how they wish to handle a specific situation like that.
Well, it sounds like we've got kind of a couple of different opinions on how the damage happened, if there's damage from the road project, if we had storm damage. So the council at this point needs to kind of think about and discuss it, if this is something that we want to cost share, as staff said, to remove this tree, if there's danger in having this tree still stand. And I don't know if Nick has said anything to that effect. I mean, is there danger in leaving the tree up?
Well, yeah,
The north side's gonna fall down?
Well, the one picture I showed has a branch that's busted,
Right.
and it's gonna come off, I don't know when. You know, who knows? It could come off tonight, it might be 2 months from now. But it's busted pretty good. I just noticed it this afternoon. I've kind of been watching it, you know, as I come back from the post office or what have you. But yeah, Nick said, especially that north side, obviously, is just gone. If you look at it, if you go out there and look at it, it's just brown leaves on it now. I mean, it's getting worse by the day. It's not, it's surprising to me how fast it's deteriorating at this point.
Did he give you cost estimate on what it would be to
When I asked him what it would cost me to take it out, he ballparked it about $2,300.
This is the picture from the storm damage on 9/17 of '21. That's the tree, and that's the tree. So you can tell too, in September, the north side was almost just like this picture here, and the south side's fuller. And this was in September of '21.
Okay.
And that's the storm damage picture with the
Yeah.
tree that
Why don't you
fell.
show that to the rest of the council?
I'll pull it up on my computer here.
Oh, okay. You got it?
Or you can show it right now, I'll just type it in. I'm gonna try to pull it up.
I'm sorry, Tom, I didn't catch the end of your comment there on
I don't remember what.
estimate. Was there an estimate?
Nick told me, he gave me a ballpark. He said $2,300.
Okay.
He said where the issue is with the tree is where it's located and how they're gonna have to drop it. You know, they're
Right.
gonna have to take it piece by piece. They don't wanna drop, now we've got those new street lights. They don't wanna hurt that. The driveways, they don't wanna bust that. So it's just gonna be he's not gonna be able to just drop the thing.
Sure.
Mr. Mayor, a couple points. One of the things the council should probably take a look at is whether or not you want to have a tree replacement policy of some sort. Obviously, Rachel's here to speak to you later about a particular plan, but that's not necessarily something you want to take a look at. Where the roots would come in for liability purposes, if it was roots that were part of the project or in the area of the project, the city probably doesn't really have any liability. That's kind of expectations, and that there's going to be some of that's going to happen. It went into the easement area, and we have to kind of maintain the easement. I'm not saying that's necessarily the best political answer or the answer that the council necessarily wants to take a look at, but it would be a consideration for the council to consider in moving forward as to whether or not the city has specific liability. I do expect that this would be beyond anything you have in your contract with the contractors on the project.
The picture up on here is from 9/17.
I see.
All right, thoughts from the council? I mean, it would seem to me that we need to really determine if there's damage from our project versus pre-existing damage, and maybe that's the next step is to get another kind of independent arborist to take a look at it and give their opinion as well, and then maybe bring it back to the council at that point. You know, I'm certainly, you know, comfortable paying for, you know, something that if it was a part of our project, that we address it. So I think, to me, I guess that's where I would stand, is that if we're kind of in this he said, she said, we don't really know exactly where the damage came from. I guess that would be my opinion.
I guess I have two questions. One is, Brian said there was kind of a survey along there to say, you know, we're gonna be encroaching into, you know, and we did take out several trees that were inside of the project. And I'm also curious about, I think the gas company was well into that alleyway when they were doing their work, which I guess I just assumed was part of the whole project. So I don't know, you know, I would say that the gas company was a lot closer, but, you know, looking at it, you know, we did the survey and it wasn't within the specs of what we needed. So, yeah, so getting kind of some more information would be good.
Has there been any arborist on the project side to look at it, apart from Nick?
In terms of maybe the tree clearing contractor, I'm not sure who that is off the top of my head here, but we could certainly find that information pretty easily. See who they have on staff.
All right. Does that sound like a reasonable way to proceed? So then we'll gather up some additional information, and then we can discuss this then at our next meeting. And
Okay, all right.
yeah, in the meantime, if you see anything hazardous, keep us posted. Keep us posted.
All right. God, as bad as I hate to say this, if I decide to go ahead and have the thing cut out, and then you guys do decide, hey, we should take care of this, I assume in that case you'd reimburse me for having it cut down? The tree needs to come out.
Yeah.
Whether you guys pay for it, whether the city pays for it, or I pay for it.
I think we'd like to be comfortable knowing that the project was the cause of this, and so I think
I understand.
if
Yes,
you
sir.
cut it down before we had anybody, you know, give us our opinion.
Oh,
then,
I see, okay.
Then
Well,
it's
let me
all
know
on
when
you.
Okay, so you're thinking the next council meeting, you might know something.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's, I think, would be, I guess, my opinion, so.
Mr. Mayor, I'll make it real easy. I think we'd have a real problem statutorily if we approved payment after the tree had already been taken out without prior approval.
Don't cut the thing down.
Well, the
Well, you
city
certainly
council has to
can.
get prior approval.
Oh,
Right.
thank you very much.
With that being said, if there's an emergency situation, obviously everybody can deal with it and we can deal with that afterwards. There's going to be exceptions in the statute.
Okay,
But for the most part, the council can only give compensation for things that are going to happen in the future.
okay,
They're not supposed to compensate for things that have happened in
I
the past
gotcha.
without approval.
all right, okay. Then I'll wait to hear from you guys.
Very good.
Okay, thank you very much. I
Appreciate it. Yeah,
appreciate
thank
it.
you. All right, anything else on Agency Street project? All right, well, thank you all for bringing those items to us. We'll move on to our next presentation. We've got Travis Freestead with us here to present an EAW for Fox Meadows Development.
Mr. Mayor, Council, thanks for squeezing me into your busy agenda tonight. We have a short presentation on Fox Meadows, its proposed development on the east side of town. I've got Troy Schramm from Schramm Construction if we have any construction-related questions. Tonight, we're just going to cover a brief overview of the project as well as the preliminary findings of the environmental assessment worksheet, which was submitted to the city here last week. Next slide. The project location is on the east side of town. It's bordered by Agency Street on the west and just south of 14. It's approximately 78.7 acres. Of that, 60.15 acres is slated for development. It's 100% residential development, so it's mixed units as well as single family. There's two parcels. One, the west side of the development, about half of it, is currently within the city. The east side will be annexed further down the road. That is currently in Luray Township. The existing land cover, it's mostly entirely agricultural. That's that green area there. We do have a large wetland in the northeast corner, which is approximately 4.65 acres. There is some smaller wetlands, it's hard to see on that graphic, that are farmed wetlands, isolated. I think there's about 5 or 6 that total about a quarter acre. So total wetlands outside of the agricultural is 4.87. One thing to note, the wetland delineation is currently pending approval. We expect that here in the next month. And then the bottom right corner there is elevations. It's relatively flat on the top there. It does go down slope quite a bit in the northeast corner as it goes down to that wetland, and that slope is currently farmed all the way down to the wetland edge. The proposed development, that's 60.15 acres, is shown there. It's mixed with single-family, detached, twin homes, as well as duplexes. That sloped area to the northeast would be open space down to that wetland, the large wetland. We currently have 4 proposed stormwater management areas. Those are the areas in purple. And then there's a park in the middle there. It's kind of hard to see, triangular section there. As far as phasing, the project would occur over 4 major phases. The first phase would be later this year. The second phase would be in 2025. And then phases 3 and 4 would be market-driven, somewhere between 2028 and 2031. So again, working west to east, the first phase would be on the west, second phase as you work east. There's a total of 228 residential units. 104 units are multifamily. There's 24 proposed twin homes, and then 100 single-family homes, which is a combination of 17 community and then 83 detached single-family. I mentioned the 4 stormwater management treatment areas. We currently have geotechnical study underway to see if what we can do with those areas as far as if it's infiltration or filtration or wet ponding. There is a potential for water reuse for irrigation on the one that's on phase 4, which is on the east side of the project. I mentioned the playground. There is a neighborhood playground in the middle that is planned. And then that northeast corner, again, is 14 acres. We're looking at potentially doing a prairie restoration in that area or doing natural grasses up to that wetland area. We wanted to share some preliminary findings of the EAW. The size of the proposed project was above the mandatory EAW size for residential development. Across all topics of the EAW, there was no significant environmental impacts that were identified. We did create a cultural resources study. That study is currently under review by the State Historic Preservation Office, or SHPO office. They'll also have a second opportunity to review that during the 30-day public notice. The findings of that were there was no findings of any significant cultural resources on the site. What triggered that was there was some archaeological studies done east of the project that potentially could have incurred further west into the site. As I mentioned before, the wetland delineation is pending approval. There'll be less than 0.22 acres of impact if that boundary is approved as is. As far as the transportation, we did look at the trip generations of what the proposed development, all 4 phases, would have in the local road system. We did not complete a model as required in the EAW. The threshold was below that for required traffic model or analysis. We did find that there was minimal increase in vehicle traffic. There was no major disruptions to existing traffic conditions or regional operations, and no impact to safety or level of service to the connecting local roads. We also looked at noise and air emissions. That would be expected from the residential development, again, all 4 phases. Certainly there'll be a little bit of noise from construction activity as that occurs, but generally residential land uses, there's not a lot of noise impacts or air emissions. And that's the same for contamination and hazardous materials and waste that would be generated from residential uses. So primarily just a typical residential area with municipal garbage and those types of waste. We wanted to highlight the next steps. Like I mentioned, the EAW is currently under review by city staff. They're reviewing it for completeness of the EAW. Once that's complete, there's a notice of availability of the EAW that would be published in the Environmental Quality Board, or EQB monitor, that is required. There would also be a public notice in the local newspaper, and then also available on the city website, and we'll probably have a hard copy as well at the city desk there. That then triggers a 30-day public comment period. It's public comments, but it's also agencies that review it during that time frame. Usually we get comments that last week of that 30 days. Once we get those public comments and they're received, we'll respond to any public comments that are substantiated, that are factual. We'll then forward that information on to the city, and city staff will review that to see if those comments are satisfactory. That then would be forwarded on to you, City Council, for a decision on the need for a negative declaration or environmental impact statement, and that would complete the EAW threshold. So I have Troy here to address any questions you may have. I can certainly address any environmental review questions, but we just wanted to take this moment to get you up to speed on the project and what's been occurring, and let you know what's be coming your way. So,
Does the council have any questions for Travis or Troy? Jennifer, could you go back to the site plan layout of the units? You were mentioning the park. Is that in that purple bit right there where she's got her cursor? Oh, there, I see it. Okay, I found it. You said it was hard to see in there in the triangle portion, and I didn't catch it. Okay, so that's a dedicated city pocket playground kind of a park. It would be the intent there. I mean, this probably doesn't pertain necessarily to the EAW, but.
Yeah, that is dedicated park. There might also be an opportunity in that purple area to the east there, once those plans get firmed up. Just depends on the amount of stormwater treatment we need and what type of treatment area would be sufficient in that area.
Is that park phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 2?
Phase 2.
So the process for us tonight, Jennifer, at this point you said city staff is still kind of doing some review, or?
Mayor and City Council, the way we've handled the previous EAW that you've been reviewing, now we have the supplemental EAW. The council determines whether it's complete, or if you need a third-party review, or if incomplete and you need more information. So we just received this, so I'm not sure if everybody's had a chance to review it, or if you feel comfortable. If you do, you could determine if it's complete tonight or if there's more information. Other than that, we could talk about whether to have a third-party review if you think that's appropriate. It's certainly not required, but it is an option.
Where would it be right now is you'd have to accept it and send it out for comment for the 30-day period.
Sure.
There'd still be one more opportunity to ask for it to have an EIS after that 30 days. So you're gonna have some information, but I will note that I did go through this, particularly with the history that Eagle Lake's had over the last couple of years. And did remark just to Jennifer just recently, before the meeting, that it did seem to be very relatively complete, and I think we are probably at the process where we can ask for further comment from the other stakeholders.
Yeah, I think just in kind of the review I made, that was noted looking at endangered species. We really didn't have much around here. The only, big concern I guess I would have would be on stormwater, and basically watching that field as it's been farmed. When we get heavy rains, that southwest corner flows down the ditch of Agency, sometimes back into your townhome development, right up to the doors. So I think we can improve the stormwater with the project by collecting it, in this process. And then, you know, everything does go right into Eagle Lake Creek, which then goes to the Lasua River, and it's all, I mean, kind of the start of our whole watershed here, you know, right up to the north there. So those, I guess, would be my biggest concerns, would be the stormwater pieces and how we address, you know, that drain, you know, the southwest portion. And it looks like you've got some ponds, some holding ponds there. You know, would there be any anticipated additional needs for stormwater management, not on your property, but south along Agency Street to the west of the mobile home park? As far as discharge of those two southwest ponds. I know you may not have gotten into design far enough on where that's all gonna go, or?
And that's actually, there's gonna be discussions coming up here, I believe later this week, in regards to that. And, you know, my engineer will be, you know, he's in the process of laying everything out and sizing and maintaining that rain event, the 100, 500, et cetera.
Sure.
And he is in the process of that.
Because it's not related really to Troy's project, but one thing that concerns me, looking at kind of what happens in this area stormwater-wise, it's right down by the mobile home park. There's a catch basin or a drop inlet right by the south entrance into the mobile home park, and when we have a rain, I see that thing swirling. And, you know, if there's a way that even we as the city can work together to eliminate that problem, and also we do have the study coming up for sidewalk connectivity to the south. In my mind, I almost see a stormwater project for us to bury some of that water as a way to also get the sidewalk. So this isn't part of your project, but I'm just trying to see it in a bigger, you know, how it affects the rest of our community. And that's one danger point that I see. I don't want a kid to get sucked down into that catch basin. And
Is that, are you referring to, and maybe Jennifer can bring this up on the site plan, the two ponds in the very southwest corner?
yes.
Okay.
Did I give you the wrong directions on those?
Yeah,
Yeah, and you can't
the
see,
southwest corner, right?
yeah, you can't see the entrance to the mobile home park, but all of that water right there, kind of, that's your farmed wetland, and that drains just on the east side of Agency Street, right down the mobile home park. And that can be kind of a little river when it drains out of that field. So it's, I mean, that's the appropriate place for some ponding. It's just then where do we take it from there? And you know full well, I'm sure, about that one storm. It was right up to the backs of some of those patio doors.
I suspect it's gone through that in regards to certain intakes and
Yeah.
other issues that were covered with corn stalks, et cetera. It is what it was, but no. In regards to sizing, you know, I know that, you know, Jones, Howe, and Bolton Lake will be putting the eyes on
Right.
their ordinance, but your concern is over the 500 years, is that what you're saying, or you're trying to get it done?
I'm just trying to piggyback on your project to fix another problem that I see, but this may resolve that problem, what you're doing already, so. Because it's just free-flowing over land right now, as it spills out of that corner.
And these are currently shown as wet detention basins, just based on the NRCS soil map. So like I said earlier, the geotechnical will shed some light on if we can
Right.
infiltrate or filtrate, but the general sizing is based on the NPDS construction stormwater permit standards.
And the other item here, and I know Travis alluded to that earlier, as far as water harvesting here also, we will be reusing water, you know, we will
Sounds like a great amenity too.
It's, for over a period of time, we have this in a couple different areas. After a period of no rain, it takes a while to charge it. But, I mean, when I say charge, the water to replenish back into the pond. So it does allow for more capacities.
This might not be EAW related, but a lot of the other stormwater ponds we have are in residents' backyards, right? Nothing that's right on a main road. Is there anything that needs to be done as far as safety goes, or is it not a kids run in it type of thing?
Typically, I don't think there's no requirement for fencing or anything around a pond necessarily. You engineering types can tell me if I'm wrong on that.
With a wet pond, generally you're trying to stay out of what they call the clear zone in this low-speed type scenario. You're not gonna have.
We're not
an
worried about
issue.
any issues. I mean, I'm not,
A
but
wet
just don't
pond
wanna.
like this is designed with what they call a safety bench, which is a flat spot there that, also called a vegetation bench that can, provide some of that safety to someone,
Does go
goes down the
Yep.
initial slope.
Any other thoughts or concerns environmentally on the project as proposed?
Mayor Oringer, I don't know if you, I should have mentioned this earlier, I don't know if you saw it at each of your places, but we did receive a letter from Blue Earth County, Property Environmental Resources. I don't know if now is the appropriate time to bring that up. But I just, it relates to the environmental assessment worksheet, the EAW, and that was one of the parcels being located in Luray Township. I'd reached out to Blue Earth County Property and Environmental Services as planning and zoning for Luray Township, so I just wanted to let them know about the EAW. We talked about the parcel that's located in the township as agricultural in the urban fringe district, and then we also reviewed Minnesota rules and what do you do when you have two parcels in different jurisdictions. And I don't know if you want to read the whole letter, or if you want me just to kind of summarize here. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to read. Maybe I should just go ahead and read it.
Sure.
Okay. This is from George Leary, Senior Land Use Planner with Blue Earth County. Dear Ms. Bromlin, the following review comments are intended for the multi-unit housing development proposal on the above referenced parcel, and that's the parcel that's located in Luray Township. R391018400005. The property is zoned agricultural and is in the urban fringe overlay district, also referred to as UFD, of the city of Eagle Lake. In the agricultural district, not more than one dwelling per quarter of a quarter section shall be permitted. There are options for additional development up to a total of 4 single-family dwellings. However, the UFD prohibits dividing agricultural zoned land for the creation of new non-farm development. As a result, in order for the project to succeed, the property would need to be annexed into the city of limits of Eagle Lake. And we're all on the same page that before any construction would be able to take place, it would have to be annexed into city limits. Then he goes on to say on Friday, you, meaning me, Mark Manderfield, and I discussed the EAW worksheet review for the project. Minnesota Rule 4410, Section 0500, addresses the responsible government unit, also referred to as RGU, selection procedures. Subpart 5B1 allows by agreement the selection of the RGU. Based on our conversation, it was agreed that the city of Eagle Lake is the most logical RGU for the pending project. And then he closes, in summary, without annexation, the proposed multi-unit development would not be allowed in the agricultural district and further limited by the UFD. But as we just talked about, to facilitate development, annexation eventually would have to take place of that parcel. So my interpretation of that letter is they're not disagreeing with the city of Eagle Lake being the RGU for the EAW. And then just to reiterate, up on the screen is the environmental assessment worksheets, just a reference from the UKB, and you guys are familiar with this. You've seen it with the Motorsports Park project. But as you know, you've got the EAW here, and now the next step is to determine if you feel it's complete. If so, then we send it to the EQB. If you do not feel it's complete, you want more information, we can do that. Or you could also require or request a third-party review.
All right, so we're at the stage here where if we as the city council deem this submittal complete, if we make motion as such, then that will pass on to all of the appropriate parties. That'll be published for public comment, and the EQB monitor and gather up information. Is there anything that anyone has concerns about from the data that has been presented to us, included in your packet? If not, then I'd look for a motion to declare the EAW submittal complete.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries.
All right.
Thank you, Travis. Thank you, Troy.
Thank you.
We'll be seeing you again.
Yes.
All right. Moving on, then we have Julie Blackburn with ISG. Speaking of stormwater, Julie, I'll just turn it over to you. Unless Jennifer, do you have anything that?
No, I will go ahead. You go right ahead, Julie.
Okay, and Jennifer, I put it in two different presentations because I wasn't sure if we were doing it together or not. So, okay, so last month I was here to present the draft ordinance for your review, and we went through that. I did make some revisions, some recommended revisions, just based on our experience in the last month and trying to make things a little bit more clear and easy to review. So the things that I wanted to go over with you tonight are the ordinance, basically a preview or review or whatever you want to call it. Recommendations on the fees, which has certainly been a bit challenging to investigate. We did also submit a stormwater program tracking proposal based on last time I was here. There was a lot of concern about how much time and energy there is going to be that the city staff has to put into tracking. And then we just have a verbal update on the program, things that have happened in the last month. And so if you want to move forward. Okay, just as a reminder, the requirements of your MS4 permit from the MPCA, there are 6 minimum control measures that you have to meet. 1 and 2 are public participation and public involvement. 3 is illicit discharge detection and elimination. 4 is construction site stormwater runoff control. 5 is permanent or post-construction stormwater management. And then 6 is pollution prevention and good housekeeping. And that's really the stuff, that's your program. That's what you need to do on a regular basis. So when you go over the ordinances that are required, we'll go down one more slide. Under minimum control measure 3 of the illicit discharge and detection and elimination, this is the slide that I went over last time, that there's a whole bunch of requirements and procedures, ordinances, training, and also some mapping that needs to go along with it. The highlighted box is the ordinances, and so those were submitted to you last month, largely remain the same. Basically, it is ordinance, the whole stormwater ordinance is chapter 18. This is the addition of 040 for animal and pet waste and 050 for de-icing and salt storage. We do the ordinances first because the ordinances really drive the rest of the content that we need to do for the program. So once the ordinance is approved, if you approve it tonight, we go immediately into developing the rest of the program requirements. So that was submitted to you for that draft ordinance. And then go down to the next one. minimum control measures 4 and 5, so that's construction site stormwater and post-construction stormwater. Those are contained in the same ordinance because it's really about that development review, both prior to getting an application approved from you, as well as then permanently managing the stormwater that is included in that development proposal. So again, these are all your requirements under minimum control measure 4 and 5, 4 and 5. You have the ordinances. This ordinance is basically a major rewrite of 18.020, which is on the water quality volume treatment, requirement to consider infiltration, and there's also many other requirements there that we'll go over. And again, once this is approved, then we will start developing all of those site plan review procedures, enforcement response procedures, various checklists, doing training, and creating all the maps. We do have most of the maps done, and so that isn't a problem, but that's an overview of that. Yep, go ahead. So in the memo that I sent out to you for the June meeting, I basically highlighted all of these changes, kind of an overview section by section of the ordinances. I don't have the language up. We could go through the language if somebody wanted to, but we tried to make it as streamlined as possible, although it still is very complex. There's no two ways about it. It's a complex issue. We used the model ordinance that the state of Minnesota has, which goes through a tremendous amount of review from stormwater professionals all over. And then we made some tweaks to it to eliminate some things that aren't requirements that seemed a little egregious for the city. And we also changed the language just to make sure it's consistent with the staffing that you have here. So the authorization, findings, purpose, those are all just template. Definitions, there's a lot more definitions. That's the majority of the pages that are in the ordinance. Scope and effect, so I'm going to go over that in a little bit more detail next. Gives a lot of information really about who all needs to obtain permits, and even if permits aren't required, minimum requirements for obeying the ordinance anyway. There's plan approval procedures, plan review procedures, what the approval standards are. And these, when we have to develop the procedures and checklists, we essentially start with everything that now is in the ordinance and put a little bit more detail in that. So that forms really those written procedures that you need to have in place. 0209 is inspections. 0210 is enforcement, and then there's also a penalty section. And that will be important for us to talk about as we go a little bit more further. And then again, 040 is the animal and pet waste, and 050 is the salt and de-icing material storage. Okay, so in a nutshell, what you have are two, and this is really only on that stormwater, not the illicit discharge. You have two separate requirements: erosion and sediment control permits, and then you also have permanent stormwater management permits, 2 permits. So the first one that we're going to go over is the erosion and sediment control. This one you really think about as it's only for the temporary disturbance, only during construction, and it means that everybody has to have a plan to limit the amount of erosion and sediment that are going off-site or into water resources of the state, wetlands, other priority areas. So it is all about just containing the soil that's in your site needs to stay in your site. You can't have it wash off anywhere. All land disturbance activity must follow the ordinance requirements, but we set a minimum level where you actually have to acquire a permit. So what this means is that even if it's smaller than the permit requirements, a site disturbance, but maybe it's causing a lot of damage, maybe it's upstream from a wetland or having erosion going on to somebody else's land, you can enforce the ordinance, they just didn't get a permit. And it certainly happens in smaller scales where other people's property is suddenly full of sediment from a neighbor's property. Even if they were just putting in a driveway or something like that, that's smaller. So we put in less than 5,000 square feet and not part of a common plan of development doesn't need a permit, but they still need to make sure that they follow all the requirements. Individual lots that are part of a common plan development are required to get a permit. I'll go over some example of what could be submitted to get that permit. Trying to make sure that we put together guidance that's clear, that's easy, and that they can develop without a tremendous amount of effort. All other land disturbance requires a permit. And the city, once there's an appropriate level of review, training, the city staff can go ahead and review that. That doesn't require an engineer's review. But just also part of this, the requirement for erosion and sediment control. I pulled some information from your permit requirements that state what you have to do in order to kind of correlate with the activities of the erosion and sediment control permit. That means you must implement an inspection program. You have to inspect. You have to, and that means wherever, maybe it's weekly drive-throughs, maybe it's only on those sites that have, known disturbance or applied for a permit, but you have to create an inspection program. You also have to develop written checklists of requirements that the permit applicants must meet, procedures for reviewing the site plan, checklists for inspecting the sites, procedures for reports of noncompliance, and then enforcement response procedures. And you have to document all of the enforcement that's conducted. And this is, again, we went over this in June, and you went, oh my gosh, our staff is gonna have a lot of work, and it is. So we just wanna, again, like we talked about last time, have it part of the culture of you gotta document everything. Because I'm sure your attorney knows if it's not written down, it doesn't happen, right? So after things are actually stabilized and there is no more soil disturbance, what we are thinking about then is permanent stormwater management. So all those stormwater ponds, the conversation that you just had about development and stormwater. So when you think about stormwater management permit, it really means what's going to happen when it's all completed, the site is stabilized. So it's that post-construction permanent stormwater quality treatment. There are a lot of requirements that the city has for that. And again, if somebody applies for a development permit, these are the things that we're going to need to review. It's required for any land disturbance activity equal or greater than 1 acre or less than 1 acre if it's part of a larger plan, larger common plan of development. Project owners must treat the water quality volume on any project where there's new and fully reconstructed impervious surface that equals 1 or more acres. And there are calculations that go along with that. So the volume must be calculated as 1 inch times the sum of the total impervious surface. And because of this, it typically requires an engineer's review. Got to take a model that was developed by whoever the proposer is using as their engineer, verify, all of those basically the engineering design that they have for those stormwater ponds or infiltration or irrigation of stormwater. All of that must be reviewed. So this is much more intensive. The city requirements, the ordinance that the requirements of your MS4 permit are that your ordinance must have requirements for the city to inspect and allow the city to maintain in case that owner, before it's transferred over the city, is not doing what they need to. The city, again, must implement an inspection program and must develop the same kind of thing. Checklist of requirements, procedures for the plan review, procedures for inspections, procedures for noncompliance, and enforcement response procedures. And you have to document all enforcement that's gone on and what the resolution of that is. So those are really kind of the nuts and bolts of what's in the ordinance. It's all about meeting those requirements. So there is definitely concern about particularly single-family lots, that are in common plan developments when we're saying they have to do a stormwater plan. We just want to be really clear that for a single-family lot in a common plan of development, the erosion and sediment control permit, they need to get one. What I did was borrowed, this is the city of Owatonna. I looked at a whole bunch of cities, what they have out there, including cities that we currently work for and do this with. And this is a really good example. It's kind of just a hand drawn, here's where we plan on putting our perimeter control, our silt fence, here's the construction entrance, and what's going to go on in there. And along with this, the city of Owatonna provides all of the applicants with some information about basic BMPs and the expectation that it's going to be inspected every 7 days and things need to be in accordance and what's going to happen in case it is found not to be in compliance with the plan that they submitted. So that's the first permit. The second permit, the stormwater management permit for a single family lot in a common plan of development, they're essentially, because we're talking about the permanent infrastructure, that would have been approved when that entire development plan was approved and that engineer reviewed the stormwater management plan. But what they have to do is go onto the MPCA website and basically transfer that lot from being a common plan of development developer arrangement over to registering just their lot, and then they are the owner of that stormwater management permit. And so that's a transfer that has to happen. I know that Jennifer's already put together all that information for the folks that are currently in the city that are developing their own lots. So that's what we're trying to do, is make sure it's really simple. If you are in a common plan of development, your stormwater is going to be covered as long as you do that transfer of ownership of the permit, but you do have to submit an erosion and sediment control permit just for your site, again, stating it's not going to go off, any of your sediment is not going to go off site.
And then Julie, can we just kind of interrupt you for a minute? And then just to, I guess, add on to that, in our process, they would have to submit that prior to us issuing the building permit. So that's a checkpoint on our application now, where we've added that, where you have to submit that before we will actually give you the permit to start construction.
So we're working on kind of adopting the permit and the checklist as we have needed to in the last month or so.
Sorry, so if they're part of a
Common plan of development.
Plan of development, which would be part of, like, this development will have a common plan development, but if there's something outside of that, they could potentially end up with a pond of their own?
So it would depend, and that's where there are waivers and different kinds of conditions in your ordinance. So it might be an industrial development, it might be a commercial development, which meets the requirement that they have to do that stormwater treatment. You don't want to accept all that stormwater treatment. And it's a requirement that they have to maintain that. There might be single-family homes that are just individual lots that it's not going to make sense. You do have an ability to waive it if that's the case. But you also have the ability, even if it's a single-family lot, but it's in a sensitive area right next to a wetland, that you actually could require them to do that. And it might be that they just have to do, some rain gardens or maybe not have such an impervious surface footprint if they're planning, like many of us have large garages or something like that.
I'm concerned we'll have ponds everywhere.
Right, and we don't necessarily want to have ponds everywhere.
I think the city council is going to be able to control whether you have the ponds or not. The reason for the second permit from the city's perspective is that in the permit, we can require that they allow us to go and inspect these things on their property. Otherwise, we have to get a warrant.
And can I point out something else too, just to eliminate any confusion with that erosion and sediment control permit? So like, for instance, with our Eagle Ridge, sorry, I get all the names mixed up, of our developments, Eagle Ridge Phase 2, where we have some of these new permits being pulled for new home construction, having this, that erosion sediment control permit requires them to lay out what their erosion and sediment control measures are going to be.
Right,
So,
I understood that first part of it, it's just the second part, the storm water drainage was where I was kind of got lost.
Yep, that's going to be a little bit more conditional on what's happening with that lot. Okay, and then I just wanted to, because we submitted the draft ordinance before, but then there were some revisions, I just wanted to make sure we went over that in a little bit more detail. So on the applicability, again, the first item A1 there is really about the erosion and sediment control permit, and it's just basically saying all land disturbance activity. And that is based on, again, some of the things that have happened recently, just making sure that there's the ability to enforce if there is off-site sediment that is causing a problem. But, and then if you could go down just a little bit more, so that item C basically says that there is an exemption, so that land disturbing activity which is less than 5,000 square feet and also not part of a common plan of development doesn't need, it needs to meet the conditions of the subchapter but doesn't need a permit. So everybody's subject to it, not everybody has to get a permit. And then if you go up again, and then the number 2 there is all about the stormwater management permit. And that's, again, looking at, we're going to have to review all of those in a little bit more detail because it's not as cut and dry. Where there's common plan of development, it's pretty easy, but if there's not, if it's an industrial, commercial site, it might be a little bit different. So those were the changes that were made there. I added some additional language to just make sure not everybody that's putting in a new garden is going to, you know, have to figure out what to do about that. And I think that's the major change to that specific area.
Could I interrupt you, Julie, to
Yep.
a question? Remember the question I asked about, like, when they're boring, like Metro, I shouldn't throw out names, but like boring fiber or things like those are exempt typically, right?
And we could add specific things like this. I mean, it has post holes and things like that, so that feels the same to me,
I just
but.
thought I'd mention it because we've had a lot of fiber going on in town, and sometimes you'll see some piles of dirt.
Yeah.
They haven't necessarily done the best job at erosion control.
Okay. And if there needs to be a specific thing listed there, I think that's fine. But, you know, the bottom line is if somebody's causing sediment, no matter who it is, to go off-site or into surface waters, you've got a problem, so.
Can I ask you a question as well? One of the concerns or complaints I think that some of the builders around here will say is, well, I don't have to do this in Mankato. Is that a correct statement, or is this taking us to a different level?
These are
Mankato's
absolutely the
obviously
requirements.
MS4 as well, so.
These are the requirements of anybody that's an MS4 permit holder. And so if they are saying that they are not required to do these in Mankato, Mankato must not be enforcing their MS4 permit.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to know, because I would assume that this is
Yeah.
the rules of
It's
MS4.
pretty
so-
much line by line. And I'm not sure if BMI's reviewed these or not, but these are the requirements. So what I have is basically a checklist of every single line from the permit that you have and what needs to be included in here. There were some options. The only thing, let me just make sure, there was some optional language like the findings, the purpose. And then the one thing that is potentially a little bit more challenging here that is, again, optional would be the stormwater rate control, which is on page 12 of what I submitted. Rate control is not a requirement of the MS4 permit. We did go over that last time. You can have it, you can remove it if you wish. Okay. That's, the other things that are optional would be a performance bond or letter of credit, also the penalties. But other than that, I have a marked up version that basically states volume control is line 20.5, 20.6 of your permit. So it's very, very tied to your permit.
I apologize, Julie. Do you want
It's
me to-
okay.
I'll go back to the PowerPoint. I'm sorry, I was trying to find,
No, that's, yeah, where that is.
I will get back to where you were at. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so I'm not sure, besides saying that this isn't different, than other places, it's very much the same. Again, that stormwater management rate control, which is, 0802 H4. That's the only one that is optional, and you certainly do not need to have that. Basically, that's saying, they have to treat the volume. The rate just means, they're not shooting it off-site in a way that causes erosion of stream banks or flooding downstream. There it is, right there on the bottom there of that page. Yep. Most of the time, everybody's doing this as far as, don't you think? Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty standard.
Mr. Mayor, to go back and answer your question, at least according to what I can see online right now, Mankato does have a city ordinance that's very similar to this in place.
I assumed there was.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure that I knew it very clearly, that we're not going over and above and.
I reviewed Owatonna, Mankato, North Mankato. I reviewed a whole bunch of them that are both regionally in this area as well as similar size. So even, similar size that are connected. Yeah, it's the permit requirements.
Well, and I think something Julie has mentioned before that I think city staff we'd welcome is facilitating a meeting with developers, maybe this fall or winter, and bringing in somebody from MPCA that can come in and do a talk to go off what the mayor was saying, just to get everybody on the same page and educate everybody. So we'll definitely get something scheduled.
Yep.
That'll help.
Okay. Do you have other questions about the ordinance specifically? The changes, the revisions to the pet waste ordinance are basically, there was some optional language, about what you wanted to put in there as far as, is it on common owned grounds, like for a townhome association. I tried to simplify it, so basically it just says, on any private property other than the owner. Townhome associations can figure that out on their own, I think. Maybe it's a requirement of a planned unit development here. So that's really all that I changed, just making sure that there's language in there about they can only dispose of it in a waste receptacle or a animal waste disposal receptacle when available. And just making sure that any person who has the administrative authority to basically charge a penalty can do so. So that's up to the city to figure out within its own purview of whoever that may mean, from the police chief to the public works director or whoever it may be. So I don't know if you want to have the public comment on that? Okay.
And Mayor and City Council, we do have a public hearing scheduled this evening for the proposed amendments to Chapter 18. This was noticed in the newspaper and publication posted on our bulletin board here at City Hall.
So the amendments are those in red here on 172 and 173.
Correct.
I think we just reviewed kind of the majority of them here. All right, does the council have any questions in regard to the amendments made to Section 18? All right, then as we did schedule a public hearing tonight to review the amendments to Chapter 18 of the City Code, I will now open a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak? Anyone wishing to speak? And I'll call one more time. Anyone wishing to speak on the ordinance changes? Seeing none, we'll close our public hearing. So then in front of the council then is the revisions to the ordinance, Chapter 18 on page 172 and 173 of your packet, noted in red. Does anyone have any questions at this time? As there was no public comment, I'd look for a motion to approve the amended language for Chapter 18 in our packet.
A motion to approve.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion?
I think there's, the enforcement and the inspections, I guess we'll have to have another new line item in the budget for this process.
Yes, I think Julie wants to go over maybe some potential fee schedules and things like that.
Okay.
Any other discussion? Jennifer, as this is an ordinance change, I'll need to take a roll call vote. So the motion, the motion is to approve the amendments to Chapter 18 of the City Code that you have in your packet. As we take the vote, those in favor would say aye, and if those are opposed would say no. And so
Orange, sorry.
we'll do this as a roll call vote. So Jennifer?
Oranger,
Aye.
Steinberg. Aye. Rourke,
Aye.
White. Aye. Whittington.
Aye.
And that motion passes. All right, and then we can discuss kind of phase 2 and next steps and where we go from here.
Yeah, I think the next slide, we go into the fees. So the ordinance has in there that you will assess fees for permits, and we need to make sure that they're approved by the city council. So this, developing recommendations, honestly, was not an easy task. It is remarkable the various ways that fees are attached for this. Very few have just really clean cut, you know, here's how much the permit is. A lot of them go on either cubic yards of material that they might be moving for erosion and sediment control, or they go on a valuation. So what is the valuation of the project for the stormwater fees? And those are just extremely difficult in my mind, especially first year we're doing this. I feel like we should set some fees that seem reasonable compared to what other jurisdictions have, and then we're gonna need to do a review if it made sense or not. So for the erosion and sediment control permit, again, these are gonna have to be reviewed. There's inspections, there's training. The city certainly has some expenses on this. So I had proposing 150 for single-family residential or anything that is from 5,000 square feet to a half an acre. If it's more than a half an acre but less than 1 acre, 250, and if it's more than 1 acre, 350. If they're doing more than 1 acre, if it's a large development, they most likely have an engineer that has designed a pretty solid erosion and sediment control plan. And so it's likely going to not be as intensive a review because they likely have already done that themselves. Might not always be the case. So that was for the erosion and sediment control permit. For the stormwater management permit, It's a lower fee for less than 1 acre because, again, most of those are going to be those single-family homes that are, you know, typically going to be on a common plan of development. And so what you're really doing is verifying the paperwork at that point, that they have transferred their stormwater permit ownership from the developer to themselves. If it's more than 1 acre, my recommendation at this point is for $100, but that for development review, the applicant needs to pay for all of the engineering review fees. It's very difficult to state, you know, on a flat fee what that's going to be, because if they submit something that needs multiple rounds of review, if it's a site plan that maybe they're using a stormwater model that maybe isn't functional or working right, there's just a lot to it. And so what we're trying to incentivize here is that everybody is doing the right thing and meeting the requirements before they submit something for review, because then it'll be a lower bill that they have to pay. So that would be my recommendation. The other thing that needs to go along with this are administrative penalty fees. If there is a non-compliant inspection, that property owner should be paying for that. Since the contractor is going to hear about it from that from that landowner, they're not going to want to pay it also. So we're hoping that this incentivizes people putting in place the things that are in their erosion and stormwater control plan. So non-compliant inspection, $150, post-construction stormwater non-compliant inspection, $150, and if it's an illicit discharge, $250, but also then cleanup costs. Let's just say it's an oil spill. Maybe there is no cleanup cost, I'm not sure. So that I reviewed 8 other smaller sized MS4 communities, those that aren't on a scheduled fee basis on either valuation or cubic feet of disturbance. These are kind of in line with those communities. And again, I think it's going to be, just going to need to see how it goes. Along with this, I believe that you're also looking at your stormwater fees, because the city has to bear some of the burden for managing this program too, not just people who are trying to build their homes here.
So, to give us an example of how this would work, I just see the single-family residential one, and that's, I guess, the one that's the biggest concern to me. So if I'm a developer and I come into town and I'm going to develop 50 single-family lots, now I've got a requirement for more than 1 acre, more than likely. So as the developer, will I get my own separate overall lot permit at $350?
Yes.
And then when I sell the lots, those builders, as a part of the building permit fee, would pay the $150 typically on
That's correct.
Single family.
Yep. So the large development would be the $350. The single family would be $150. Yep. So you had it exactly right.
Okay. Because that's one of the, the concerns, I guess, that we've talked about as a city council in the past, and some of you are new to the council, is how do we maintain our building permit fees to be competitive to Mankato, to be better than Mankato, and still doing this. And so as we continue to kind of add little bits and pieces, and maybe this is just seeing it everywhere. I guess I haven't gotten a single-family housing permit in a while, but I know that's been one of the concerns, that builders will bring, that homeowners will bring. But
yep.
I do think also when there's lots available, people are going to build here. So regardless of where we're at.
Yeah, I definitely understand that concern. That's why they're in my mind kind of low compared to what I saw. And again, it's kind of, what does the city want to do as far as making it so it's palatable to people who want to build here, as well as then what kind of offsets does the city and its own stormwater utility or stormwater fees wish to fund. It's a
So-
tough one, and these are only
No,
recommendations.
I like the
It's-
guidelines. They feel appropriate to me. I guess the question then, moving forward as the council, so we do this, we've got a development with 100 lots. These fees start coming in. How are we going to track that? Are we going to be creating a new fund where all of this money would go into to pay for inspections and reviews and
Great
things like
question.
that?
So that will go right into, I think I actually had Carrie put that into it already, but add a line item for SWIP review fees into the budget. So we'd have a line item on the revenue side, so it absolutely would not get commingled with, like general funds, general building permit. It'd be solely for stormwater.
Okay.
Yep.
I know one of the things at the Capitol too that's been going through is just our communities getting, there's some communities that have had such a boom of housing, their building permit fees are ultra inflating their general funds, and they might not use all of that money, and then the question is, where is it going? Are we overcharging people for the actual service that's being done? So here I think we've got obviously inspection, training. There's lots of things that this will be kind of a revolving in and out type of a situation.
So the enforcement, would it be our building inspector that does the inspections, or would it be the city, have we determined that, I guess?
We haven't
Okay.
determined that yet. In some places, I suppose we could hire somebody solely that would come in and do, whether it's ISG or somebody like a building inspector that has the training or the certifications, or our city staff to go out and do the inspections, depending on the volume of permits. I mean, if we only have maybe 10 permits a year, that's no big deal, but if you've got, a big development that goes in, man, that could be, and then you get rain events, and then you're out there all the time.
So that, Tim, that's what you're talking about, not only fees would go in there, but anything that we have to, would go into that same.
Is this just for new builds, or is this for people that are doing new driveways, landscaping, stuff like that? Like, where does this fall into place?
Well, all of those in the ordinance sets those thresholds. So again, if they're doing less than 5,000 square feet, they don't have to get a permit. Above that, they have to get a permit.
So if I read that correctly, under scope and effect is where we find that,
Yep.
exemptions,
Yep.
re-subdivisions, installation of fences,
there.
signs, telephone, electrical poles, and other kinds of posts or poles, emergency work to protect life, limb, or property, nursery, home garden, or other agricultural practices such as tilling, planting, harvesting in your own private property. And then a word I've never heard of, silvicultural or forestry activity. What is silvicultural?
That's what it is.
Trees?
Yeah.
I will say though, if it's okay, if I just kind of digress, to go back to the fee thing, it is a huge burden on staff, and we don't have specific stormwater staff, and so you kind of look at the fees, and I know you don't want you have to be competitive, like the mayor is saying, but then you also look at all the other things that get shortchanged in the process, and you look at the fee to that person versus our overall stormwater fee. And I am working with Shannon Sweeney on updating or helping us with doing an analysis of our stormwater fee to make sure that we're in line and competitive with other communities, but yet also able to keep up with our capital costs with that and operating supplies.
It's a growing program that you have here, and there's a lot that's happening right now. And so you're going to have more expenses.
I feel like it's so new, so it stands out. Where if we give it 5 years,
Yeah.
we'll be like, oh, this is just normal,
Yeah, right.
So then if I were coming into town to build the new Chick-fil-A restaurant in town, as a commercial developer, I would go off of the size of my property.
Yeah.
And typically, yeah, I would have a erosion sediment control plan built into my
Yep.
construction and things like that.
Chick-fil-A will have engineers that are doing that design, so.
If anybody from Chick-fil-A is watching, so you're done. We've interrupted you. You're done on the fees?
So I don't know if you want to do something with the fees, so that's.
Well, I think we definitely have to. So at this point now, as we've made the change to the amendment, we do have current building permits in process that would be exempt from these fees that we set if they've already got their permits. And this would just be moving forward, correct? So.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm glad you brought that, because I was wondering the same thing. We have currently 2 permits right now for new homes that have not been processed fully, so would those be exempt? That's a great question. I thought we should talk about that today too, and I'm glad you brought that up. They haven't been approved yet, but when they, came in to apply for the permit, we did not have the fees in place, so maybe we just start fresh when the fees are adopted.
Until you publish it, publication.
So we might have a flurry of permit
Applications.
applications.
You can put a moratorium saying this will apply to any, applications that be made in between or not take applications until it's enforced. But for the 2 applications that have already been made, this would not apply.
And this would be, so in our ordinance, we don't have the fees listed, it's just, we have to have the fee schedule. Is that okay to do it that way?
Yeah, generally speaking, cities will do fees by resolution. And I understand that the concern regarding some of the larger projects and how much those things would be. Typically, the way it kind of runs is that offsets the additional costs we have for the smaller projects. That sometimes, you're gonna have a single family home that's gonna come in and may take, several hours of staff time, and, so you're looking for somebody to make the program that's gonna be as close as possible to building itself.
Thoughts, questions, concerns from the council?
The only thing I know to be true is whatever you charge, they're gonna say is gonna be too much, and whatever you receive is not gonna be enough.
Well, then we can go by the recommendations that Julie has presented to us. If we want to establish those as fees for the various erosion and sediment control permits and stormwater management permits, some of our penalties, those would then be added to our fee schedule as of tonight then. And then the ordinance takes effect after it's published, and then we can begin. So if there's no other questions or concerns, I guess I would look to have a motion to approve the fee schedule that Julie's laid out for us tonight.
I'd make a motion to approve the fee schedule.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries.
Okay, then do you want to do the tracking proposal? Again, based on the conversation, that we've had several months in a row now about the amount of work that is needed by staff in order to keep track of all of this, we did put together a proposal for your review, just on having kind of a single site in order for all of the inspections, both of construction, stormwater ponds, all of that to take place. So what we submitted was for an MS4 map tracking tool, basically to help you meet all of the tracking and documentation requirements for the city as part of the MS4 general permit. So it would It's basically a GIS mapping system that allows you to put in, it's got your entire stormwater infrastructure, it has lots, it has everything on it, and so that there is basically the option for pointing and clicking on a facility or a lot and documenting inspections, taking pictures, tracking all of that information. And so by tracking all of that information and documentation, at the end of the year, when you have to do your MS4 permit documentation or report, you basically can download all of that information. It can say exactly how many things you inspected, what was found, did you do follow-up inspections. We can also track all of the education and outreach requirements, including the dates the newsletter went out, what was the newsletter topic, how many people were, emailed on that, or whatever it might be. So this is really to streamline all of the workload associated with all of the written procedures and tracking that I covered in the earlier slides. So it would just be one source. Now, the only thing that would not be covered under this would be if there was an enforcement action. We currently don't have that. That would need to be documented in a different way. But not that it couldn't happen at some point, we just don't have it available. So this is essentially what it is. It's field portable, so if they had an iPad or while they're at their desktop, whoever it might be that's doing the inspections, contains all the layers of your MS4 program. So your entire stormwater infrastructure uses the aerial map as the base map. There's all different layers to that map, so it has, where is your priority areas for inspection, where is it that it's a groundwater contamination site, and basically they can click on a site, pop-up window opens up, and it can be, at this stormwater discharge, we're doing an inspection. What is the inspection status? If it's good, that's great. If not, then it triggers additional follow-up reports and, that a reminder to come up that you need to go out and inspect it again. So you have to put in your comments. Again, you can put in pictures, all of that kind of stuff. Yep, you can go down. So it's so that's the detail. You can look at each specific site. Is it active? Who owns it? Who manages it? How many times have you been there? Is it a repeat inspection? That kind of thing. It really allows for efficient export of annual reporting data. Provides that one-stop shop for tracking everything. Reduces a lot of those internal files that people are trying to manage. And then as the development of your stormwater program grows, it can continue to expand also. This is just kind of a simple version in order to help get through, these next phases without needing a tremendous amount of new paperwork to be created. So that was the proposal that we put in place, sent to you. It's a super handy thing. I mean, that's what we use all the time. A lot of cities do that. So the proposal is for $15,000. It's essentially something that we would develop and start demoing and trying out in 4 months, do the training, and then it would be live. So that's a proposal for your consideration. If you have any questions, I would like to demo it live, but I'm not able to right now. So.
So the $15,000 is a one-time setup fee, basically, to get the GIS map going?
All the programming to make it unique for what the city needs.
And that would be like hosted on the cloud, so we wouldn't need any additional hardware
Nope.
or anything?
Yep, it's just a website.
Okay.
It would be, there's a $2,000 annual hosting fee. So once it's created,
There's an ongoing cost,
then it's
too.
an ongoing cost, yeah.
But then city staff would be able to go in and document
Yep.
everything there?
Yep. Future kind of uses could be public facing, could be educational, could be all different kinds of things. But this is really just trying to get you through that annual documentation on your inspections and reporting.
So is this something that's already been developed by ISG and?
Yeah, we have it in other cities.
So as we start to use it, will we be able to have input on functionality or changes or anything like that as
Yes.
we move through?
Yes, it's
Okay.
custom.
And we would still own all the data that gets inputted in, we would, at the end of either a relationship or whatever, we would be able to
Yes.
retrieve all that data. How about support? Is that $2,000? Does that include support for city staff as they have issues and questions as they use that through, the next 100 years or however long we're gonna use it?
That is a really good question. And, I would probably have to ask our GIS group lead about that. My understanding is that this was for the first year. And so depending on, if there's a problem and it's not working, then obviously we're gonna help you. But on enhancements, those are fee-based. But, if there's a problem with it, or you have a change in staff and you need a refresher, that would be support that would be included.
Usually we would end up, well, in my experience has been you have a yearly contract, right? So it's either
Yep.
evergreen or yearly. And that would include support, and it would also reference and talk about maintenance and support. And also new feature functionality and how that happens, and who's going to be responsible for that as it rolls along.
Right.
And
The
then-
enhancements in order to meet all of the web,
Right. Because you're gonna
requirements,
change
search.
Every year, there'll
Yep.
have to be a patch update.
Yep,
for that.
exactly.
Making sure that's included. And then I know that, a lot of these, at the end of the year, we're gonna, you talked about having all the data available for the reports, but are they actual in the report format that we just filed?
No, because the MPCA is an online form that you have to fill out.
And will you be there with us when the state goes, well, that's all wrong?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
I've submitted a lot of things to the state, and there's always questions about what's this number mean?
Yeah, we've submitted for the last few years what the annual report is.
Thanks.
Absolutely. Good questions.
So we don't use this system currently, clearly. How is it all documented? Because I'm assuming that you guys are already monitoring some of them and, looking at them, evaluating all that. Is it just pen, paper, pull out the 3-ring binder and spend hours compiling it for year end, or like?
So, on my end, we have meetings, we check in, and ISG Julie she's got amazing spreadsheets.
So is that your name,
She's got a
ISG
spreadsheet for
Julie?
everything. So she helps us track, if we've done this educational piece in the newsletter, or if we do an inspection, like on my computer, I've got the addresses, a file for each one, and then documenting, because Julie's encouraged us to do the documentation. So if we do an inspection, what the results of the inspection are, we save that. So it's just kind of right now, I guess, maybe a hodgepodge, if you will. It's not organized. But we're
So if we were to come up and say, hey, can you pull up this house address and tell us what inspections you've done, it would take you a few minutes versus opening it up and clicking a button and being done. Or if we were to ask Brian, this streamlines things where Brian can see what you're seeing, everybody's on the same
I'm
page.
not sure how it all works yet. I don't know if,
Yes, it
That would
would.
be-
And so it would have transparency for the users. Yep. Which means whoever's coming into work on Monday that wasn't there the previous week could, see what was happening and going on. That's a good question, though. Again, so many of these written procedures and inspection procedures are new. So they have to be in place by October 22nd or something like that. So there's a bit of uptake here. And if you guys need to think about it or have if you have questions that you would like us to come back with more detail, we certainly can. But I know that tracking is probably the biggest concern really about all of it, so.
I guess from my perspective, this is kind of an expense into a new fund, and I'm wondering if we should hold off just a bit and discuss this as we go through the budget. And then maybe in the meantime, you could see, you know, the $2,000 hosting fee, you know, as John asked about kind of maintenance and support.
Yep.
You know, so we can have, you know, a idea of what, if we're gonna budget for something, that we can
Yep.
kind of get it right.
Yep.
But yeah, I think this is a great tool, and that would be a help to staff to point and click. And
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, one of the suggestions I would have is that you get a copy of the proposed contract, because I do have a couple concerns regarding data practices and
Sure.
and regarding the actual ownership of the program itself, because we're restricted under law about exactly what we can do, and sometimes cities don't necessarily realize that.
Okay.
Okay.
So
Makes sense to me.
some contract
Yep.
language
Yep.
and things that we can take a look at, but I
Yep.
think, I guess from my perspective, I'd like to push it back toward budget meetings and
Okay, no problem.
kind of keep it on the front burner, but, because obviously you've got a few months of setup time to get it rolling.
Yeah. And I'll be back here a few more times with additional things that need to happen. And I'm glad you brought up that contract language, especially on the data practices, because I know we had our standard contract language in here, and that would not be appropriate for this. Okay. So thank you for that reminder. And I think the last thing is that we just wanted to kind of provide a verbal update of the really our last month or so. So I don't know if you want to start, Jennifer?
Hey, Jennifer, before you do that too, regarding this, it would be nice if they could, at least Brian and Jennifer, seeing how it all runs,
Yeah.
whether it's talking to the community, seeing it kind of do its thing, to make sure that it would run how you guys would want it to run, as being the sole users
Yep.
of it. Right. Because if it's not doing what you guys want it to do, then it's not money well spent.
Definitely can do that.
So there's been a flurry of activity in the last month. We had a MS4 audit, and it's just, we just hadn't had an audit yet, so they just picked the cities randomly, I suppose. And I asked the MPCA contact that we worked with if there was a reason why we were getting audit. She said, no, there's nothing, no specific reason. They just have to audit every, Eagle Lake has not been audited. So we went through that audit process. We haven't gotten the audit finding letter back yet, but we know, and as we talked to the MPCA contact during the audit, that we are, you know, working towards getting these minimum control measures in place. And I think she commented, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but that she thought that we were putting forth our best effort to try to get on top of these, and recognizing that we have very little staff. I mean, there's cities that have just a department dedicated to stormwater, and we do not. So we're working through it. We haven't gotten a letter back with the findings, but there will be some findings, and so we will, I think we're probably really on the cusp of probably meeting those, and we will the next time we're getting those things in place. And then also in the meantime, we had dealt with some uptick in construction activity, and complaint was received, and MPCA was notified, and so we've been working to do inspections. We've contracted with ISG, and we've been in contact with MPCA, and they've been a great resource. They're, a lot of times I think we think that you don't want to talk to them, but actually talking to them has been very helpful, and they've had some really good ideas and resources, and they've you know, kind of been along to help us, and you know, nobody's gotten in trouble or anything. We're just trying to make sure that the you know, development taking place in our communities within compliance, and contractors, developers we've worked with have been overwhelmingly very cooperative and good to work with. So right now we're just going through and trying to implement the routine inspections. If there's a major rain event, then we have to follow those processes, and just ensuring compliance. And then right now, Brian and Andrew in the Public Works Department are signed up to take some classes to get certified to do with stormwater illicit discharge and
Inspections.
And I signed up for a class on illicit discharge as well. It's just online, so that's not you know, that bad, but it just really helps us have a better understanding of how this all works and what to look for. Let's see what else I'm trying to think of. But maybe Julie, you could kind of maybe talk to a little bit about how these audits work, and and if it's, common that there are findings or if there's not findings.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
You know this, you're more well-versed in this area than.
So I know it's super intimidating to have an MPCA audit. When I was at Bowser and I was the assistant director there, we did a lot of audits on various groups. So I have been on both sides of that. Carly is the MPCA staff person that's been doing this, and as we were going through the audit, and she had a whole form that, we had to go kind of point by point through, and, there was definitely some things that we were not in compliance yet on, but again, we had a year, and that doesn't end until October, and so we're kind of in this betwixt and between of where they're being audited on requirements that aren't technically in place yet, but we need to be doing. So I asked Carly how many audits come back without findings, as far as needing program improvement. And she said she'd been there 11 years and has done hundreds of audits. And in that time, she only had only one that came back without a finding that needed to be addressed. So you're going to have some findings, and I think the bottom line is, I think she said even you guys are well on your way, really making great progress. So we're getting there. We don't know what it's going to be. So, but along with that, there was a lot of conversations that happened. MPCA is willing to help us do a contractor workshop and a number of things. So it was a really good conversation, but it really helped us focus, and I think the timing was actually excellent for our ordinance, because there were some things that were found out in that draft ordinance, and that's why the revisions came forward about what should be included, what shouldn't be included. I think it'll all be fine. I'm sure it'll all be fine. It's just an intimidating process to be audited by your permit regulatory agency, so.
One of the last times you were here, I think, there was some discussion on statewide look at communities maybe that would be kicked out of the MS4 limits. Has there been any movement on that you know of?
There is no movement that I'm aware of. We actually brought it up to Carly on that call, and she said kind of the same thing, that it's going to take, I think the Census Bureau had just finalized their public comment period, and so now they have to address all the comments, and then it has to come into the EPA for their program requirements, and then there's a lot of process that has to happen. So it might never happen, and it might be a couple of years, and by then you might be at a population that it wouldn't matter. You'd be requirement anyway. So, yeah. If anything happens, I will definitely let you know. Any other questions? Thank you for your patience and your time. This is a lot to get through, and
Thank you, Julie. You've
thank
done
you.
a fantastic job. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, we're only on item number 4 on the agenda. And Brian Sarf is still with us here in regard to a sanitary sewer and water main extension project.
All right, so last Thursday, we did receive some quotes, as we kind of discussed at the previous meeting, for our favorite sewer and water extension project over there by what used to be Chuck's Body Shop. We did receive 3 quotes, fairly comparable. They were over the engineer's estimate. Low bid was at around $106,000, and latest engineer's estimate was about $92,000. Low bidder was Bromling Excavating. The city has recently contracted with Mr. Bromling on recent projects. Based on that, if deemed financially feasible, we would recommend that Bromling would be an appropriate contractor to conduct this work. And that's really all I have on that. So the next step, if if the council feels it's appropriate to move forward, it would be to award, look to award this contract.
Do we really have any choice?
I was gonna ask the same thing, if we have other residents in Eagle Lake that are gonna be in similar circumstances. I mean, I remember how it all started and never thought we'd get to this point. So are there other residents that, I shouldn't say need to be forced into it, but you know, when agency happened, there was a couple that were in it and we said, nope, you have to be hooked up so that it doesn't come to this again. Because we started, as far as I recall, of just granting and saying, fix your problem, and now we're 107,000 into it. So is he the last that?
That
Or do we
says,
not
I was
know?
looking at Brian, I think, are they the last ones, these two properties? It's, okay. Because, Joe Merle, he's connected now. Trying to think of anybody else around the outskirts. That was the next in, but.
Okay.
I guess, yeah, that was my question is, I mean, the request has been made, we need to provide the service, correct? I mean, if we were to say rejected, then where do we go?
Right. At that point, Mr. Reagan gets into a little bit of hot water with the PCA again at that point, and yeah, beyond having him do it all himself, I guess, you know, that's.
The issue the city would have is if he absolutely said no to it, and he had to do it to himself, is whether or not he'd be allowing some kind of septic system to be inside the city limits, which is something we've usually tried to stay away from altogether. So there's no good answers here.
Right, well, I thought the
Problems, but,
state was in essence saying there wasn't a way to
no.
rebuild his septic system or get him a new one. There's,
Septic system, so he'd have to come up with something else that the state would allow,
right.
otherwise be non-compliance, and then we have a problem property sitting there. I don't know that there's a better answer.
When Parkway was constructed, was he offered to connect, or why didn't he connect at that point? Because I mean, he was within city limits at that point too, so how did this not happen at that point?
My recollection was, and I don't know the specific property, but when we were doing this and moving people away from septic systems to be on the city system, is that there was a number of properties that were allowed not to go on there because of the cost, with the understanding that they would eventually have to pay the cost to come onto the city system. But that's probably 15 years ago. But one of the issues you come in is with grandfathering in properties, as you're bringing in new facilities, you're bringing in new things that you're offering to them, if they're in compliance with everything they're supposed to be under the previous code. We can't necessarily force somebody to make the updates, even though we would want to.
Right.
Eagle Lake's not the only city that's facing this, but we are getting towards the end of the septic systems that kind of got phased in, so I think shortly most cities won't have this problem anymore.
Just
So-
a tough pill to swallow.
Yep.
106,000 for one hookup, essentially. Two? Ooh. That didn't help much, sorry.
It'll take a while to pay it back.
Is there any recourse to have the homeowners pay anything toward this? Or, you know, they have to,
Is he paying assessments and stuff to this, or is this not, I mean, if,
It's on the property.
okay.
I don't know if that would cover the entire cost.
Oh, no.
of the assessments.
No, I didn't think we could,
So that brings up a whole nother, you know, if you're gonna go through the special assessment process, then we have to follow a certain chapter 429, so that, you know, that's not a process that's been followed. We did talk about, I think, early on, there was, the Linda Drive water main, what do we call that, water main extension project or connection, and the city didn't do special assessments in that situation.
Oh, for the drainage improvements, we recently did. Yep.
I believe that the city, if my memory is correct, we probably have agreements in place with these property owners that they would pay whatever cost it is gonna be, But my hesitation on that is knowing the history that Eagle Lake's had with the number of city administrators. I don't know if there's any way for us to find that information. So I think it's out there. I think that's where the council at that time was looking to kind of protect things. But I think between the move from City Hall and, quite frankly, let's look up those city administrators you have, there seems to be a number of documents over the years that are no longer findable.
So if we make approval, is there a schedule? Did you have that in your report, when the work would?
At this, at this point, it would be premature to have a schedule. I can give you completion dates, which would essentially be this year yet. Okay. We did allow, I didn't put these in here. I believe it's at the end of September for most of completion. There are some supply issues with manholes. We did make an allowance for them to, if they have issues getting a manhole, not to delay the whole project, but they can come back later, whether it's in December or something, and dig a clean out in, essentially. But generally, the schedule is for this fall still, as we've kind of been on. Specifically, it's not going to be months and months of construction, but until we really engage what would be a contractor, we don't have a firm schedule on construction.
All right. Any other questions? Then I would look for a motion to approve the water main extension project to Bromling Excavating for $106,435.
I'll make that motion.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Is there any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. They weren't very enthusiastic, guys.
All right, my second and final thing on the agenda tonight, another continuation from last month's meeting, was a discussion about the water treatment plant and next steps. So city staff that I put a simple proposal together for what that next step looks like. And really what that is a concept plan, as we discussed last month. That would include looking at the site, creating a preliminary layout for the site itself, the treatment system, how we're going to connect into the main. During this, we'd identify what land acquisition is needed. We can identify at a high level what environmental and cultural conflicts might arise. We'd work with you guys. We'd be looking to maybe develop a concept, have a work session, work anything out, and then revisit it. And that's really what the proposal includes. Something that wasn't necessarily solicited at the last meeting, but I included here, kind of at the recommendation of my partner, John Groutman, was the preliminary well assessment, which is seen as an important step moving forward, but at this point, probably secondary to a concept plan. Really, that well assessment is looking at the aquifers in the area. There's new, excuse me, there are new statutory limitations on the Mount Simon aquifer, which is currently what we're tapped into. In other words, we can't increase the flow capacity out of that aquifer at this point. So we have to be looking at what the other options are as the city increases its pumping capacity. Really, this would be done with via subcontractor. They've given us a price which is exactly that $6,500 that you see in the letter proposal in front of you. So with that, again, to two parts of a proposal for you, a concept plan and preliminary well assessment in front of you, if the council wishes to make forward progress. At this point, as again we discussed last month, we're at a little bit of a standstill in terms of hard schedules, you know, with legislative sessions and all that sort of being backed up at this point. But it seemed that the desire of the council was to keep some forward momentum going, and this, what's in front of you, is really how we see that momentum carrying forward. Were there any questions about the scope of work or anything in this letter?
Brian, I guess I do have a question about the well assessment.
Yes.
You note here that you would identify test drilling areas, but at this point there would be no drilling or anything.
No, that's,
Done.
it's kind of like a preliminary step, and at some point, we'd like to get that done, you know, before we're done with final plans and all that, but then they'd actually be doing test drilling holes at a later time. So that 6,500 does not include the actual site investigation. It's purely a desktop study.
That just jumps out at me as a little high for that. I guess, you know, we'd be getting an assessment of what aquifer is available, the types of soils we have there. I guess more what's the...
Essentially what it will tell us, we have a site identified, you know, is that a viable site for wells? Certainly, it's very convenient to have the wells at the water treatment plant. Otherwise, we're gonna have wells off-site that we have to pipe all the way over to the water treatment plant. If that comes back negatively, I'll call it, we have to start thinking about, okay, what is this site? Is this the right spot? You know, are we gonna look somewhere else, or are we looking at, you know, cost to bring raw water into that part of town that we've identified? That's one of the main things. It's a necessary step in the overall process. In terms of that price, unfortunately, I can't speak to the price. That is strictly from a sub-consultant, no markup or anything like that.
Because in my opinion, I guess that's almost maybe more important of the steps. I guess, you know, I don't know when we get to the point where we need a new well anyway, if the community keeps growing.
Yeah, with my understanding, if we did do another well, then we would abandon number one up by the water tower. That well would be abandoned, and then we'd have,
Right.
that would be our primary one, and then we'd have our well 3 and would be our backup, and well 2.
Because the one by the water tower has the lowest capacity, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's the 1952 well. Yep. Yeah, and I think, yeah, it only pumps, I don't even think it pumps 300 gallons
True.
a minute. So, yeah,
Yeah,
we'd-
certainly we are, you know, assuming the assessment comes back positive, we are allowed to abandon old wells and construct into the Mount Simon aquifer. It's just as the city continues to grow, and we are approaching that firm capacity on the well, pumping capacity. We're not at that point yet, but especially as we start talking about Fox Meadow type developments, 80 acres of development, we're starting to approach those capacities.
Very good, Mayor. So if we don't do the preliminary well assessment, we could be doing a concept plan on land that might not be the best area, potentially.
Potentially, yes.
So there you go again, another easy choice.
So do you need the concept plan to do the preliminary well assessment?
No,
Or can you just say this is the area we're thinking of, we can do the well assessment there?
yes, if the council chooses, that would be a perfectly acceptable route, you know, to essentially reverse, you know, what's in front of you and,
But you say these are in the right order, right? The $4,000 concept plan, you would do first.
in terms of, yeah, identifying or keeping momentum going forward. John was of the opinion that this would be a worthy task.
Not to interrupt, but another thing I think maybe to point out too, that we want to make sure we're well-positioned, so that if we do get funding, that we are ready to keep moving along. So I think that's where that concept plan comes in as well. Just making sure we can say, yep, this is our plan, and get that funding and go.
In theory, the concept plan wouldn't change much depending on where it goes. I mean, the facility is gonna be the facility, it's just making sure that there's enough land and it's in the proper spot.
That's correct.
realistically. Okay. And it could be silly not to do the preliminary well assessment, otherwise we might be having to have added cost if we're not having wells close to it. Right?
That's
Right.
correct.
Any other thoughts or opinions?
And these steps are still steps in line with getting us to where we need to be for the funding, hopefully next session, quote unquote.
That's correct.
And the federal requests are still working their way through, so, I mean, fingers crossed, we could, maybe get some funding with that.
Yeah,
Right. The goal is being relatively low cost, not, diving into
Right.
detailed engineering at this
Keeping the
point.
edges, yeah.
Yep.
But at least showing somebody we're serious about this project.
Correct.
If there's no other discussion, I'd look for a motion to approve the proposal as presented.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second, and just to be clear, that includes the concept plan and the well assessment, kind of the whole package, so.
Yep.
Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you very much for your time this evening.
All right. Captain Barta is with us here from the Sheriff's Department. And Jennifer, I'll let you give a little bit of background, you and Chief Cop, and
Well, first I'll just apologize, I'm so sorry it took this long. I think I told you on the phone, maybe by 7 o'clock we'd go up, so I.
It's all right, no apology. Absolutely,
This is shorter then.
we're all practiced up.
Well, I'll just make this really quick to give you a little background. So, Police Chief John Kopp and I have met with Captain Barta with Blue Earth County Sheriff's Department. A couple months back, we talked about the possibility of setting up an agreement for on-call services, just knowing that we are just struggling with staffing and working through the process of maybe possibly getting a fourth full-time officer. And what do we do in the meantime if somebody gets hurt, sick, and we get really down to bare bone staffing, and we need to, make sure that we have sufficient coverage, somebody on call. And right now, as it is, John, Chief Cop will notify Blue Earth County, but there's, absent an agreement, we really don't have that good reassurance that there's always going to be somebody that's going to be able to help us, because it could be called to somewhere else or somebody else that has an agreement. So long story short, I guess here we Chief Cop had brought it up to me again and asked that Captain Barta come to talk to us tonight. And just to be clear, this is solely to talk about establishing a contract for on-call service on emergency basis for when we don't have any Eagle Lake officers available that are on duty or available to take on call. So And then before I turn over to Chief Cop and Captain Barter, one other thing I talked to Captain Barter about was if there would ever be an opportunity to do any sort of training with like active shooter or violence in the workplace. And he said he'd be happy to come and possibly give a training to our businesses and maybe the mayor and city council and staff. And I'll let him talk about that a little bit. So there's two parts here on why he's here. So I don't know, Chief Cop, if you want to say anything before we turn it over.
Yeah, the only thing I'd say is we've been gracious enough to take calls for a couple hours here and there when we've needed them to. We haven't used them a lot. It's just be nice to have in place in case an emergency would come up where if I'm up north on vacation and somebody gets hurt, it gives me a little time to get back and somebody's able to cover till I can get back, or an odd event like that. So again, it's been used very sparingly, and it wouldn't be a scheduled type thing. I think Captain Barter and I talked about that. It'd be in an emergency type situation or where we need somebody to take call for a couple hours here or there when we didn't have an officer on duty or available. So with that, I'll turn it over to Paul.
Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, John. And thank you, everybody, for allowing me to come in and talk to you tonight. I would like to just back up to the previous observations and sincerely commend all of you for taking the time to ask questions and go through the agenda items that were up before me. I have the opportunity to go through other councils and sit in other meetings, and seeing you guys actually ask the questions and have that forethought is nice to see. So for that. I think Jennifer and John did a really good job of explaining where we're at today, and I want to also kind of put everybody's minds at rest, hopefully a little bit, to say that some of the staffing issues, if you want to call them issues that we're seeing or the city of Eagle Lake may be experiencing right now, is not isolated to Eagle Lake, okay? For the sheriff's office, in my time, my 20-plus years with the sheriff's office, when we first started to hire around that time when we were hiring about 20 years ago, we were seeing upwards of about 100 applicants, about 60 to 100 applicants. The last round when we opened, we had 13. So we've seen that pool of applicants taper off significantly. And when I had a minute or two, I was kind of looking through just to see where we're at today. 70 agencies hiring right now on the Minnesota Post Board. 70 agencies hiring, most of them hiring, or many of them hiring multiple different positions, all the way from police chiefs to officers and deputies. City of Minneapolis is upwards of 100 officers down. Okay, so just to give you a little bit of perspective, you're not alone in some of this. The really good thing, though, I think, is the collaboration that I like to call out amongst the law enforcement agencies in our area, and I think government in general. Point being is, if the city of Eagle Lake needs a hand, we're going to lend that hand and come over and try to do what we can to help. And I know that if we are backed up and we're tied up in a call in Amboy or Lake Crystal or something, the staff here is going to come out and do their best to help us. So we do have that collaboration. I don't come before you tonight to try to sell a service, to take away your police department or do anything other than to support public safety in your community, okay? I think hearing some of the decisions that you had to go through earlier, hopefully this one's a little easier, okay? And let me just outline how the parameters of this work. We've structured it with other communities in the county, and we've provided the service pretty economically, I think. From the hours of 7 a.m. until 3 a.m., if there's no Eagle Lake police officer available to take a call, and it's one that needs to be addressed and we come in to manage that call, it's a $40 an hour expense to the city. So there's not a retainer for the services. There's not anything other than an opportunity for us to get a little bit of advance notice, see if we can have people hover around or be sort of close to the area, knowing that we're on call, so to speak, which means essentially you may see some extra patrol for county cars come in, knowing that there isn't staff available here. But $40 if we come in and take a call. If we're just on call and there's no call for service that comes in, there's no bill, okay? Those hours, though, between 3 o'clock in the morning and 7 o'clock in the morning, the price goes up to $60 an hour if we have to come in and take a call. If we have 3 deputies come in to manage a call, it doesn't get multiplied by 3. It's per hour to come in and manage that event or that incident. It's really designed, honestly, to be economical and a choice and an option contractually for the city to be able to, again, work with us to cover some of those calls. We did look at and had some minor conversations surrounding if this could be scheduled or not. I think that's really a different conversation, because then that's kind of a bigger staffing ask for us. So at this point, it would just be, I guess in my mind, an opportunity for the city to make sure that they had us sort of as a backup. I do worry sometimes when we get into some of the staffing challenges. We've seen it with the COVID era and some of the restrictions that come out for quarantine isolation and stuff like that. You know, your staffing levels get low and you have something happen, whether it's an injury or something like that, unplanned, unpredicted, you can really be in a bad way pretty quick, and the calls for service don't stop coming in. So that's a real quick overview on it. Again, no retainer, no fee, only a fee if it's used. It's billed at those rates. And again, it's just a flat rate per hour that we come in to provide the service tracked by records, not multiplied by the number of staff that we have assigned to the event. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Anyone have any questions? One that I would throw at you would be, in these periods or whatever, if we've got some needs, you're on call, would that be visible in patrol at that time? Or you're still going to be out, not like a constant patrol around the community, but you're saying maybe a little bit more presence that we would notice?
Yeah, theoretically that should be the case. The only thing I would say is understanding that staffing is staffing, and if we have calls for service that pull us away, you know, we're going to be tied up in prioritizing as necessary. However, in the event that we are on call for community, that email notice goes out so people are aware of it, and we expect that the patrol deputies are going to be out, understanding that we're on call for Eagle Lake, presumably when possible, be somewhat close to be able to respond. If somebody's, I think skip over, if somebody's not going to ask the question, I'll just throw it out there too. Eagle Lake would be the only community that doesn't have this agreement in place or something similar to it currently. The one other thing I'd throw out there to consider is that whenever budget cycles come due, there's always conversations to review fees for service. And I think that the opportunity right now with the pricing structure as it exists, it may be a good opportunity for the city to look at it a little more strongly than maybe other years. It's not a promise or a statement that the price is automatically going to go up, but I think getting in right now has its benefits too, because it clearly can always be reassessed and looked at for what those fees are. And they're designed actually to support and kind of offset the wages of our patrol deputies, not counting the fringe. So, you know, their rates, and then at an overtime rate for those overnight hours, because if we have to call somebody to come in to backfill because the staffing levels are low, it's going to cost us a little more to have that person come in.
Do you know what the maximum response time would be? Because I know right now we're, 20 minutes on our on-call? I mean, I know there's a lot of patrol and deputies that live in Eagle Lake, one that's a neighbor of mine, you know, so some of them might be on call and 2 minutes away. Others, I mean, what would be a max?
Well, I think we should probably talk a little bit about what on call would refer to, because I think there's maybe some difference in the verbiage. If I'm on call, let's say as an investigator, it's going to be, the response time is going to be for me to get the call, get dressed, or get my equipment in order and get in and respond to the call. When you're entered into an agreement with us in a case like this, it's going to be for an on-duty staff that's already out in a car patrolling to be able to respond to the location of the call for service. So a little bit different in that regard. I would tell you that it's somewhat arbitrary on what the response time could be, knowing that, if you're in Willow Creek in the Louisville area on the southern most part of the county, you're a good 20-minute run code to get up here. Conversely, of course, if you're in town or Madison Lake. I would say, though, we would expect that the calls, we should have a response within that 10-minute time frame generally, hopefully a little bit quicker than that.
So worst case, it wouldn't be any worse than what we currently have for on-call, in theory.
Well, I'm going to say that if you're referring to on-call as somebody getting dressed, getting their equipment and coming in, we should be able to exceed that because we're already going to be, equipped and ready to go. Yeah. Just remember, there's all weather and all kinds of different variables that are going to affect the response time. It's just a kind of a lot of variables to it.
Jennifer, can you remind me at least that we talked at the last work session, cost of what on-call versus, I forgot what you guys called it. You called it on-call and then call-outs, I think is what it was. You know, there's different prices and stuff like that. And then we had the conversation, especially now going down to 2, hopefully back up to 3 full-time officers. And some of those officers on weekends, they're on call. They can't go enjoy the weekend, go hang out with friends doing that because they're always on call. They're always there, having to take call. Where does that pricing, if we stay to that versus this? I mean, because the $40 seems very reasonable versus.
Right, and it would depend, so what our on-call rate, it's not a high rate, it's just an hourly rate. It's like, what, a couple, $2.25. But where you run into the issue is with, when you get the call, then you have an automatic 2 hours of overtime or time and a half pay. So I think it'd probably be pretty comparable. I mean, when you look at,
Yeah, I mean, the only thing, I think so, and the only thing, we've stayed pretty comparable. I know the county, if they get called out, it's like 3 hours or something like that, so, but we've stayed pretty comparable, and what I like to offer to the city is that normally our officers will be on call, because normally, I take some pride, I guess, in my department being able to serve the city. And having them see an Eagle Lake officer show up. Not that the county can't take care of it, they can, but there's we're a little more vested in the call, I think. And just because we're here, we're gonna be following up with that person. It's a friendly face, but yeah, it's comparable, I guess, if we get called out to what the sheriff's office would charge for a deputy to come over.
except for, now, that's a good question. Do you guys, is it, so if you get called out, is it just the per hour, or is there like a minimum? It's just per hour. So then it would probably be more favorable to have the sheriff's department.
Well, that's what I was gonna say, even from a quality of life standpoint for our officers that aren't physically in the squad on duty, they're on call, to just be able to have a day off and not be on call and have that quality of life piece, you know?
Yeah, but what I understand is this isn't that type of contract, right? We'd have to talk to a different type of contract if we wanted to offset some of our on-call hours.
True.
This is just for if nobody's on duty and nobody's available to be on duty, or nobody's available to be on call.
Right, and
This would kick in.
And just where our budget is going with the 4th full-timer, on-call would be very minimal, because we'd have staffing during the day and at night with our 4 full-time officer plan, and it would be a rarity to have, unless you had sick or a vacation time, to have to cover like we are now, so to speak, on the weekends during the day. So it'd be more of a rarity.
Yeah, I think it's a far different conversation due to the staffing effects it would have on us to be scheduled on call. So yeah, more of an emergency, or actually an emergency type situation set up, yeah.
I work with a number of the cities in Blue Earth County, and they have various contracts with the sheriff's department. They've all worked very well. I don't want to disagree with John a little bit, but I do think he may have more problems with staffing than he's anticipating, even if you get the 4th officer. You have a history, and John does a good job of hiring people. As long as he continues hiring good people, you're going to have turnover. You know, it's just the nature of the beast. And I don't want to give him a backhanded compliment, but John does do a good job training his officers. And I expect that even when we're at 4, we may not see that. We're going to see periods of time where we're always kind of looking to hire people and getting some, part-timers in and have everybody in place. But I think he's seen that already, where you've seen some of the strain with an officer leaving and bringing a part-time officer up, and I don't know that he's got a lot of people that are in line for that part-time position, so we're gonna see some openings that are just gonna be around for a little bit longer.
All right, any other questions? And so you already have a contract that you've got with most other communities in Blue Earth County, and we're just the outlier, and we've never really signed anything?
Your words, not mine, Mayor. Yeah, we do, and understand that there's about 5 communities that we provide the sole law enforcement services for throughout the county. Tri-City Police Department dissolved, and so there was some changing around there, but of those that maintain a police department outside of the city of Mankato, we do have this very same contract with the same rates that I'm offering with those other jurisdictions.
Yeah, I think the rates are very, very favorable for us, so. I think we should move forward. If no one else has any other thoughts, I'd look for a motion to enter into a contractual agreement with Blue Earth County for emergency on-call services.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. Well, we look forward to seeing the contract, and, or do you already have one in hand?
Assuming it's a similar contract to Mapleton, the truth is.
I think I have one in my police file at home that I've got somewhere.
Before they signed it, so there's no changes. I didn't have any problems on that. Can't imagine any problems on.
Yep, we'll just let staff take care of review and we'll get things documented.
And I'd asked too, Jennifer had made mention at one point about the active shooter training. I don't know if there, I know that it's been a long night, but I can hit it real quick if you guys would like to hear it. 2012, we started to build an active violence, active shooter training curriculum. It was in advance of Sandy Hook. I kind of recognized that we had an issue that was at the forefront and was going to start to really take off. And we started to look at what other areas we're doing, specifically did some consult with Bloomington on lockdown strategies for the schools. And it sort of expanded in the private business. Once Sandy Hook happened, and we started to see that trend really kick off, this approach started to get regionalized. So fast forward about a decade or so, and what we had done in the meantime was we created standardized curriculum that we could roll out schools, law enforcement, fire departments, and local businesses, places of worship. So what we wanted to do and what we created was a regional approach to this so that law enforcement was training on the same concepts and we were pushing out the same information to private businesses and schools so that everybody kind of had an understanding of what the priorities were and what needed to happen in organized chaos that would be one of these sort of events. What we offer and what we try to push out, especially after Uvalde and some of the more recent active violence events that we've seen, is the opportunity, if there's businesses that are interested, governmental organizations, or a combination of both, that we can come on site, provide a PowerPoint presentation, which I call as an outline for discussion. It's not going to solve all of the questions, all of the building security strategies and all of that sort of stuff, but what it does is it allows people to have the exposure, start thinking about how they would respond in this type of event. If they're a business owner, things they might want to consider for safety and security of their building, and things like that, outlined for discussion on this broader topic. So it's no cost to the city, it's no cost to the business that chooses to host it. I think it was North Mankato several years ago did it, I think in kind of a collaborative respect with their city staff along with then inviting businesses in to kind of go through it all together. So I only throw that out there because I know that there's a lot of discussion surrounding the topic now because of recent events. And frankly, I think that there's some, nervousness amongst people, not knowing what exists in the areas that they live and work as to what the response would be and how prepared people are. So I offer that out as a service to anyone, and it was convenient timing with being here tonight. So I just simply need some outreach if it's something we want to coordinate or be a part of.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Yep, thank you. Did we lose Rachel?
She had an emergency at home and had to leave. She
Okay.
sent me an email. So Rachel will be done here with service in not too long. If you're comfortable with it, I can kind of walk through this. This is a component we do need for our the DNR grants to be able to continue getting funding. And I haven't submitted the reimbursement request yet, the final grant report, because one of the requirements is you have to have an Emerald Ash Borer management plan. Pretty straightforward, but anyway, so.
Yeah, if you want to give us the kind of the high-level overview, and if anyone's got any questions, then.
Sounds good, and I'm not gonna do near as good of a job as Rachel would, but I can just give you the basics. I feel like I've learned a little bit about Emerald Ash Borer in the last couple years. But basically, the purpose of the plan is just so that we've got a plan of action to be able to manage emerald ash borer. We know it's coming, we know it's, Worth County's under quarantine. So we have started, we've done a tree inventory, so we know how many ash trees are on public property. It's mapped. We have that to be able to show this is where all of our ash trees are. And then as we've removed ash trees, we've done 10 this summer using the grant, then we can mark where those have been removed, and then also what trees were planted as a replacement. So our goal basically is going to be to do about 10% each year, and so we've already chipped off 10% this summer, which is great, and the Public Works has done a good job. And Brian, outside of our grant, will continue to, remove trees as needed. So I won't go into all the detail that she has here, but just, like I said, in summary, we talk about what our plan would be to remove trees with, and then also Lake Crystal, I believe, has either purchased or is in the process of purchasing equipment to be able to treat trees. And so Rachel was also spending time over in Lake Crystal, and was hopeful that we would be able to work out an agreement with Lake Crystal to be able to rent their equipment, and then we'd have to pay for the chemical to treat trees. If we get into a situation where it's here and we need to be able to try to slow down the impact. We don't want to take down all of our ash trees at one time, so using the treatment is one way to kind of be able to buy us some time and then take down the ones that need to be removed now. And then also, what Rachel worked on is coming up with a diverse tree canopy so that we're, with the trees that are replaced are, giving us a good variety, and so we're not planting all the same trees, and then, how many years down the road there's another tree disease, and that's all those trees. So we want to try to avoid that. Let's see, right now there is no monies available for private tree management on private property, just through the DNR. There's monies available for trees on public property, so we'll continue, hopefully each year, be able to apply for more funding and then try to chip off, little bit by little bit here. And then also there's a component in here about education, and Rachel's done a good job of putting together informational blurbs and articles that I can put in the newsletter. She's met with property owners that have questions. We did a thing at the park as an educational opportunity. And then also on her plan, talks about wood disposal and following the guidelines with quarantine. And we don't have to go through those in detail. And then cost, kind of what the estimate would be. And let's see, I think that's about. And then, as I mentioned, the tree replacement and the different tree varieties. So, and then she also has in here best management practices as far as when to take down the trees, treat the trees, plant trees, those sorts of things. So I don't know, Brian, if you have anything that you want to add to this. I'm kind of rambling on here, but go ahead. So. Okay. I think throughout the last couple of years, we've had a community forestry member now for. Rachel's our second one, and I think, we've kind of worked through the process of doing the tree inventory, having a better understanding of EAB and what we need to do, and just trying to manage it as best as we can, get on top of it, and just, incrementally try to remove the ash trees on public property. So I'm sorry, I apologize, I really rambled through that, but, I didn't write the plan, but I feel comfortable after reviewing it, with what's in there. I don't think the city is being held to anything unreasonable. We tried to use words like may, not will, so, I think this plan is something the city will just have to review, and then, as circumstances change, we'll have to update accordingly.
Any council questions?
I think the biggest question is private trees, right? So, we're working hard on that, Will there be programs, I'm assuming there may be programs in the future where we offer replacement trees and things like that. Not something that we can afford, but, if there's grants and things coming up, that might allow for that if a tree comes down. Be interesting, and encourage the diversification of the trees there too.
Any other thoughts or questions? Then you've got the Emerald Ash Borer Management Plan that Rachel has put together. I'd look for a motion to approve this plan.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. We've already gone through our public hearing. We've gone through the first 3 items under new business. So the next item we have is under new business, hiring of Connor Guillemette as full-time police officer. This is on page 221 of your packet.
So Mayor and City Council, you guys have probably all figured out, it's Connor. Connor is sitting in the audience here this evening. He is currently working as a part-time officer with the City of Eagle Lake. With the recent resignation of Officer Romig, we placed an internal announcement advertising the full-time officer position that's open. And so the hiring committee that was comprised of Police Chief John Kopp, myself, and a representative from the Minnesota Valley Council of Governments, we met with Connor and we interviewed him again for the position of full-time officer. We were impressed with Connor. We thought he did a great job in the interview, and we recommend that he be promoted from a part-time police officer position to a full-time officer position. Just to give you a little background, Connor was hired on April 4th. He's since obtained his Minnesota Post Board license and has successfully met the department's physical and psychological standards. And he's been progressing through training at a good pace. And according to Chief Kopp, Officer Connor will be ready to work independently, hopefully on or around August 1st. So that'll be coming up here soon. And so this time a conditional offer has been made to Officer Connor at step 1, $22.60 on the wage scale. He would have a performance evaluation following the completion of 6 months of service as a full-time officer, and then he would have an opportunity to advance to step 2 on the wage scale if he receives a satisfactory performance evaluation. Then following 12 months of service, he would have another evaluation and then have an opportunity to move up to step 3. So within the completion of 1 year of service, he'd have the opportunity to be placed on step 3 of the wage scale. And typically, Eagle Lake has kind of a history of, in most positions, of just hiring at step 1 and then throughout that first year, then by the end of the first year, having the opportunity to bump up to step 3. So it's something to work towards. So I just was talking to Connor this afternoon and knew he was going to be working tonight, and so mentioned when we get to his point on the agenda, it'd be nice to have him introduce himself, and then you guys can see him. You've probably seen him out in the community already. I know my kids have already noticed we got a new officer at Eagle Lake and very friendly and interacting with the public, and so I don't know, Connor, if you just want to just tell us a little bit about yourself. And absolutely, sounds good. Yeah.
How's it going? I just graduated from school in May, so 20. I decided to come to Mankato to get my bachelor's. I'm from Prior Lake, Minnesota. So I was looking for a part-time job while I'm going to school, just to build that experience, and working through with John and Jennifer hiring me. It's been awesome so far, and feel really supportive here. So, and he came to me with a possible full-time opening, so I decided to look at school and just, make some schedule changes and still be going to school, but also working hopefully as a full-timer here with your approval. So thanks for your time, and yeah, you guys have any questions for myself? I guess, yeah, I'm pretty new, so I haven't seen most of your faces.
That's a good thing, right?
What are you just finishing some law enforcement at MSU or additional degree? Yeah, additional. So to be a police officer, you only need your 2-year associates, and I already got that at Alexandria. But for myself, I wanted to challenge myself to get my bachelor's, and I think it would just help me in the long run. So decided to do that. Awesome.
Captain Barta already told us that you're going to leave soon, so.
Hey, you did not.
Did we get that 10-year contract?
Yeah, that's right.
Signed?
He's from Prior Lake, so he's gotta be a big guy. That's where I'm from.
Really? Awesome. So any other questions for me? Or,
Well, how do you pronounce your last name for everybody?
Guillemette?
Gilliman. I always want to
yeah.
add the E at the end. So that's why I referred to you as Officer Connor, because I always
Yeah.
want to add the E, and I knew that wasn't right. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, also, I guess I didn't really mention, I kind of rambled through quick. You know, my family was from around here. I told Jennifer and John when I interviewed, so they always said this is a great place to be, so I decided to look on, and they had a part-time opening, so I applied. So, yeah, it's going good so far, and thanks again, John, for, you know, mentoring me and training me. He's awesome, so, and Jennifer also always answering my questions, bugging her about stuff, so.
So is Kevin your uncle then?
Yep, Chris is my dad, yeah.
Sweet. I'll ask Kevin.
Is this pending further inquiry?
Yeah, that's what they told me is when I come back here, a lot of people, I've already had, like Mandy knows my parents and everybody, so it's kind of funny.
My biggest, concern, was the fact that I knew that you were trying to go back to school. So if you've got that all worked out, I guess that's.
Yeah, I guess I could touch a little more on that if you'd like me to. So
It's not necessarily important
Okay.
to this. I just so that you got it figured
Yeah.
out. My concern was, you just jumped in part-time. We're gonna, look at moving you up to full-time.
Yep.
Does this hinder your schooling?
Yeah.
You guys
Yeah, and it's.
can work it out?
Yeah, I've talked to Jennifer and John about it. I dropped one class and moving it to the summer so I can kind of spread it out a little more, and then I put more of my classes into 2 days. So instead of having class 4 days a week, I only have it 2. So then those other days I can either really just take a day to decompress from school and work, and then be able to, do a good job at my job. So not overloading myself too much. So I think they worked great with me on that. So.
You'll be fine doing a full-time job and school. I did it.
Yeah.
I'll do it, right? Yeah, that too.
Well, if there's no more questions, I
Just know
appreciate
that
your
there's-
time.
Just know that John always provides donuts at every lunch break.
Oh, yeah? I love donuts, so that's perfect.
But there's never a lunch break, Garrett.
That's right, you're right.
Turn close.
Perfect.
Thanks, Connor.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's always nice to get to see faces in here sometimes, because sometimes, we don't get to know some of you guys as much, so.
I like to talk about it, so if you ever have questions.
And you can stick around until they approve your hire, so.
Any questions in regard to the resolution 2022-32? And this would be moving Connor Guillemette from part-time officer to full-time officer.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion?
Mayor, are you on fire rescue too then? No, you're not, okay.
That was Willette.
Oh,
Any other discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
aye.
Any opposed? That carries. Congratulations. Now are you going to work? Now are you going to work? Item number 5 under new business is a quit claim deed for Outlot G on Parkway Avenue.
Great. So I know Mayor Oranger brought this up previously, and maybe there's another member of the former council. We need to try to get rid of some of these outlots, and this one just happened to come up when we were going through property tax statements. And so did reach out to both Anna Fastenot and, I'm sorry, I'm hitting blank on the name, Scott Wingen. I did not hear back from Scott. I will reach out to him again, but I did hear back from Anna, and she wanted to move ahead and was willing to pay the conveyance fees. So I wasn't 100% sure if I need to bring it back to the council, but I thought to err on the side of caution, I just bring it back just to make sure before the mayor and I sign off on everything that we do have the council's blessings to go ahead with conveying this.
Yeah, every real estate transaction has to come in front of the council. You have to deem it property that the council, that the city no longer needs, and then go quitclaim deed. So I hate to add things to your agenda every time, but you will have to see each and every one of the quitclaim deeds.
Jennifer, remind me, these are those two, like that triangular wedge, and then that other one. Okay, so,
What was Center Street, right?
Yeah, yeah.
because I ran into Scott randomly after our motorsports presentation when I was on a walk. He was at a neighbor's house, and he asked me about this specific thing, and asked where the city was at with it. Has anything moved? And yeah, so what his comment to me though too was, you know, because he talked about the splitting. So does this include that splitting of the, or is that separate? Because he said in his mind, he's like, I'm still interested in the storage units, and Allied was interested in the rest. How can we make that happen? And then can we combine those? You know, he's got like what, 4 parcels in one. So I mean, I think it's a whole big piece there. So is that all together, or are we? Because it is messy. That whole area is split up into so many small chunks. So what is the process to get through that piece too, or is there not? Are they just going to own 4, 5, 6 parcels right there?
He's gonna own 4 or 5 parcels right now. He can go through the replatting process, which he probably needs to do anyways.
Okay.
But there isn't a way really to go around the replatting process. This parcel, if he gets it, may be beneficial to him as part of that process. You know, when he looks at doing things, you know, it'll make sense going forward, but, unfortunately, they're kind of separate matters. So
Okay.
we deal with this first, he gets it, but he was told that he probably had to go through that replatting process anyways.
Okay.
And I'll follow up with Scott again, too.
Yeah, and I think he's definitely interested. His comment to me was just that he doesn't want to have to spend thousands of dollars to make this happen. So I think it's just the conversation again on what's all expected.
He can find whatever attorney he wants to and pay him and get it there. It should be a quick deed, you know, so that we have the legal description, $165 for the state deed tax. It should be not very much.
Minimal.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know.
So this just solves those 2 small weird parcels, not that bigger issue that he brought up.
Well, this one.
Okay.
More or less just making the map easier to identify things, isn't it?
It is. I think you have a bunch of parcels that you received as outlots that just weren't developable.
Yeah.
And so we just have a bunch of random property around town that nothing, we can't really do much with, but it's down the city is in. So.
And the public works are gonna have to mow all of that, the other lots, don't you? Or not these 2, but you will the Legion and Eagles Nest, the one in front of your.
Yeah, the outlets would be the city property, so they maintain it over.
Well, this would just be the one tonight would be outlot G, the one for Allied overhead door. The outlot F is the other sliver
Okay.
for the Wangen property. So if there's no other questions in regard to that, I'd look for a motion to authorize the mayor and administrator to sign the quitclaim deed for outlot G on Parkway corridor.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
Mr. Mayor, I assume the motion's also that this property is not necessary for the city any longer.
To declare it as not necessary, yeah, I think that's kind of the general gist, is that these slivers are,
Those attorneys sometimes like things to the city.
I make the motion that the outlet G is no longer necessary to the city of Eagle Lake, as it was an old street that's no longer in use and has been covered with grass and a parking lot.
I'll second that.
all right, we have an amended motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. Item 6, then we'll move on. Bids that were obtained for annual street maintenance and repairs.
Yeah, Public Works evaluated the streets for repair this year, and we sent out 3 bids, or 3 proposals for bids, and we got 2 back, one from WW and the other one from Minnesota Paving and Materials. So the low bid was WW Blacktop. So I'm just requesting approval for that bid for the street repairs that's needed for this year. if there's any questions of what's being repaired. And I also do have a second, some sidewalk and some curb repair too that I'd like to talk about after this too.
What's timing on this look like then? Still this year by?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they never really give me a time.
All right, if there's no other questions, look for a motion to approve the street repairs from WW Blacktopping at $22,622 as recommended by staff.
I'll motion that.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. Any other discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That carries.
And then I also wanted to discuss, we did send out for some sidewalk repair and curb repair. I did send those bids out too for three contractors. And I didn't hear back, and I went to contact them again. I did get, just actually real late this afternoon, I did get a bid back from Get You in the Loop that I'd like to get that done, but have it approved next month. But it'll be probably split up for street repair for the curb work and sidewalk repair too. But just wanted to maybe give you a little heads up of what it is and stuff. But I got it really late this afternoon, so I didn't have time to get anything prepared.
All right, thank you. The last item under new business we have is the 2023 enforcement grant application.
So this application, Blue Earth County is the head agency that takes care of the application. We're just a partner agency, and back in middle of June, so somewhere in there, he requested that we put in our, I guess, intention of joining the grant, only because he had to get it submitted with our, if we wanted to be part of it, we could always withdraw if we didn't want to be part of it, but he needed to submit it initially with the application. And this is a grant that we've been in for several years now, and nothing's really changed with it. Still has the certain criteria you have to meet for training and different things like that. So it runs from, this new contract will run from October of this year to September of next year, of 2023, according to how they run their programs. So again, pretty much the same thing as we've been doing. Just looking for your blessing.
Is this TZD, John?
It is.
Okay.
Towards zero deaths. It's through the Office of Traffic Safety. Minnesota Office of Traffic Safety administers the grant to the fiscal heads of the grant, like Blue Earth County, and then Blue Earth County takes it from there and divides it out. So.
And then all we need to do is just to sign on to the grant. That's, I guess, the action that we're looking for.
Correct.
Any questions for Chief Kopp? Then I'd look for a motion to move forward and sign off on the 2023 enforcement grant.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And that carries. We'll move on to the city administrator's report.
Great, try to keep this moving here. Just wanted to let you know, there's, as part of our strategic planning process, Region 9 is the consultant we're working with, and they came up with a What Do You Love About Eagle Lake Drawing Contest. We do have permission from Smith to use some of our grant funds for the prizes since we can't use our regular monies. So that has been, the deadline for that has been extended to July 31st. We've tried to promote that. And then we've got a community planning workshop as part of.
I got a question, is that for kids?
Just kids,
Just
yep,
kids,
youth through 12th grade. Oh, geez, Garrett. You've got a little one, but she's not quite in kindergarten yet.
I would submit a historical artwork of Eagle Lake.
Well, that's kind of cool. You may not be able to get the prize,
I
but.
could do something, I just was wondering.
Then the next thing coming up on Wednesday, as part of the strategic planning process, again with the same grant, there's going to be an open house and then also an opportunity to gather more input. It's going to be facilitated by Region 9. They're going to review the survey results and then also conduct a SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities. And there'll be some light refreshments. So if you can attend, please RSVP. There's a link in the newsletter and then also a QR code. So hopefully we'll get some people that'll sign up for that. Next thing, pedestrian connectivity study. This is being held with Mankato Area Planning Organization, so MAPO, and then Blue Earth County and the City of Eagle Lake. There's going to be open house on the purposes of what's being considered. And then the park survey is part of the planning process for the master plan for Lake Eagle Park. Park survey is being conducted online. So we're using driving down there, parking on the trail, and that we do have our handicap parking spaces available in the main parking lot, but something we'll have to keep looking at. So needs that we have to address regardless of whether you use ARPA funds. But that's something I think that we should really seriously consider is looking at using those funds either towards that or water treatment plant to help offset those. And for my research for some of these things. So, and then speaking of paying for things, we're in the 2023 budget process. And so department heads are going to be working on their budget worksheets, and we'll be having a special budget work session sometime in August because we'll have to certify the preliminary levy before the end of September. Can you continue to work on, but there's just lots of things going on all the time.
Any motions to adjourn?
I'll motion.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're adjourned. The battery made it to the end.
We've had short ones too, though.
All right, does anyone know how to shut down the YouTube?